Chapter 903. After the departure of the Han family, Witherbone City was bustling with activity for a period of time. Not for anything else, but for stripping the House of Kieran's assets. The House of Kieran used to be one of the most powerful families in Witherbone City. However, after the death of their patriarch, Shatio, 5 high gods, and hundreds of their divine guards, the House of Kieran was reduced to a second-rate family clan. With the death of all their top experts, the House of Kieran would not be able to protect its enormous assets. Those who had been envious of the Kieran family's wealth and assets for a long time took action on the day the Han family left Witherbone City. Shatio and the House of Kieran had done so much for Hill, and he should be more than willing to help them. He should prevent those jealous family clans from taking action against the Kieran family. However, the first person to take action was none other than Hill. Using the excuse that the House of Kieran had provoked an unimaginable number of enemies for Witherbone City without Hill's consent, Hill took over the Kieran family's largest territory and assets. Most of the Kieran family's assets fell into Hill's hands overnight. While the Kieran family enjoyed the meat, others would have to drink the soup. The other families, big and small, took away the remaining profits of the Kieran family. Many of those who had grudges against the House of Kieran had been afraid of Shatio and the House of Kieran's power. But now, they were taking revenge on the Kieran family. They hunted down the orphans, women, and children of the Kieran family. As Shatio had suffered great humiliation before his death, many of the Kieran family's divine guards felt the same. They felt that the Kieran family had been branded with the mark of humiliation. They left the House of Kieran and joined other family clans. They became murderers of the Kieran family's orphans, women, and children. In almost a single night, a major family clan that had towered over Witherbone City for 1,000 years had been wiped out. All the direct descendants of the family clan, young and old, were hunted down by their enemies. In just a few days, the ancient House of Kieran was almost wiped out. There were not many members of the Kieran family left in Witherbone City. 90% of the Kieran family members were killed in the purge. However, there was one person that no one dared to touch. Witherbone City, south of the city, inside a dilapidated divine hall, Li Wei's body was curled up into a ball. Her eyes were blank as she held an urn of ashes in her arms. Beside her, the ancient lizard king, Degasi, wore a sorrowful expression as he lovingly combed Li Wei's disheveled hair while sighing repeatedly. In a short period of 3 months, the innocent Li Wei had experienced the cruelest change in the world. She had watched as Shatio, who had loved her dearly, was skinned and stripped of his bones. Her brothers and sisters were mercilessly killed, and her sisters were ravaged. A great clan had collapsed in an instant. Li Wei witnessed the scenes of agony. The earth-shattering changes finally destroyed her mind. Unable to bear all of this, she became deranged. In just 3 months, Li Wei, who used to be the proud daughter of the Kieran family in Witherbone City, had turned into a deranged woman who spouted nonsense all day long. As the proud daughter of the Kieran family, she should not have been able to escape after her clan was annihilated. However, as many people knew that Li Wei and Han Shuo were close friends, no one dared to touch a single hair on Li Wei's head even though her brothers and sisters had died in front of her. Everyone who had met Han Shuo sternly warned their family clansmen not to have any designs on Li Wei. They were truly afraid that Han Shuo would retaliate against them for Li Wei's vengeance. They knew that they were not overgods. If Han Shuo wanted to kill them, it would be as easy as flipping his palm. Moreover, no one would avenge them. Sigh, it's been hard on you. Degasi could not help but let out a soft sigh when he saw the deranged Li Wei. A figure approached like a ghost and quietly landed in the dilapidated shrine. He looked at Li Wei's current state and let out a deep sigh. In this matter, Li Wei is the one I've let down the most. Degasi was startled. He stood up with a vigilant expression and subconsciously shielded Li Wei behind him. But when he saw who it was, his expression relaxed and he put on a bitter smile. "Why are you here?" Han Shuo could still remember the fluctuations of Degasi's soul. Given his current cultivation realm, it would be a piece of cake for him to search for Degasi's soul within a certain range. Han Shuo, who had come to Witherbone City to start a massacre, suddenly remembered Degassi and Li Wei. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to find them. Han Shua's heart ached when he saw Li Wei's state. Although the Qiran family and Sha Ti had been heartless to the Han family, Li Wei was innocent. She had done everything she could for the Han family. Although her efforts were futile, Han Shua would never forget her kindness. How is she? Han Shua let out a soft sigh and asked Degassi. After going through so much, she had a mental breakdown. Li Wei is the closest person to me in the Qiran family. I really don't want to see her like this. Degassi sighed and said, after I came to the Qiran family, I learned that the previous owner of the Qiran family had died long ago. No one in the Qiran family thought highly of me. I don't care if they live or die. Only little Li Wei, perhaps because of my relationship with you, treats me well. Brian, can you think of a solution? I can erase that part of her memory and make her forget everything about the Qiran family. Only then can she start anew. Han Shua thought for a moment and helplessly said, I don't have any other way but to give her a fresh start. That's fine. As long as she can be happy, it will be fine. Forgetting about the Qiran family is actually a good thing for her. Degassi nodded and praised Han Shua's suggestion. Han Shua placed his hand on the back of Li Wei's head and sent his consciousness into it. He gently wrapped around Li Wei's soul and began to wander through the wisps of faint light that were hard to see with the naked eye. He searched for all the memories related to the Qiran family and used his consciousness to erase them. If even Sha Ti, a cultivator of the energy of death, could extract memories from the souls of others, it would be even easier for Han Shua, who had reached the Skybreak realm in demonic arts. His consciousness was more profound than any energy that could pry into one's soul. Erasing Li Wei's memories would not leave any residual effects. A few minutes later, Han Shua let out a soft sigh and withdrew his hand. He looked at Li Wei, who had fallen into a deep sleep, and said to Degassi, when she wakes up, she will completely forget everything about the Qiran family. Take her to Ethereal City in the Space Dominion and go to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Don't stay here. Degassi nodded and replied, I have been planning to take her away from here. Ethereal City is indeed a good place to be. I'm sorry. Everything that has happened to her is because of me. She is the only person in the Qiran family that I have let down, said Han Shua with a heavy heart. He looked at Degassi and sighed. Degassi patted Han Shua's shoulder and carried Li Wei in his arms. He said, it's all in the past. Don't blame yourself. I know what happened. Sha Ti, and those people have gone too far. I can't stand watching them die. Han Shua felt a little better after hearing Degassi's words. After thinking for a moment, he asked, tell me about what happened, especially about those who participated in the attack on the Han family. Degassi stared blankly for a moment. Suddenly, his face jolted as though he recalled something. He cried out in surprise, Brian, you didn't come back to look for us? You came back to kill Hill, didn't you? Han Shua did not hide anything from Degassi. He nodded and admitted, that's right. Hill is the main culprit. Of course I won't let him get away with it. But Hill is the city lord of Witherbone City. His divine soul is imprinted by the Overgod of Death. You will incur the wrath of the Overgod of Death. This. Degassi started to panic and tried to dissuade Han Shua from giving up. I know. Don't worry, I'll be fine, replied Han Shua. Han Shua was rather touched. He suddenly felt that his friends from Profound Continent were truly kind and unreserved in their concern for him. Degassi forced a smile and shook his head when he saw that he couldn't persuade Han Shua. He sighed and said, back then, when I first met you in the underground world of the Dark Forest on Profound Continent, you were just a puny necromancer. Who would have thought that after a few hundred years, you would rise to prominence on Elysium? Now, you even dare to provoke an overgod. Life is truly unpredictable. After hearing Degassi's words, Han Shua couldn't help but recall the time he spent with Degassi in the underground world. Back then, Han Shua was indeed just a puny necromancer. Back then, Han Shua didn't stand a chance against Degassi at all. Han Shua did not expect that in just a few hundred years, Degassi would rise to power on Elysium and possess such remarkable abilities. All right, I won't try to dissuade you. Other than Shati-O and Hill, there are also... Degassi did not finish his sentence. He reported the names of all the participants he knew. Bring Li Wei to the Space Dominion. Witherbone City will be in chaos for a while, said Han Shuo. His eyes were ice cold. He was ready to start a massacre. Be careful, Degassi reminded Han Shuo when he saw that Han Shuo was about to leave. Han Shuo didn't reply. His figure blurred and disappeared without a trace from Degassi's sight. He left no trace behind, even faster than the power of space tearing. ****, Witherbone City. In the City Lord's mansion, Hill had summoned the patriarchs of the major family clans to discuss who would be the chief of the third core of the Kiran family after the extermination of the House of Kiran. Suddenly, a chilling and sinister energy shrouded the entire mansion. The patriarchs of the major family clans who were in the middle of a discussion jolted to their feet. When they felt that familiar power, they understood one thing. The god of slaughter had returned. Chapter 904. Hill and the patriarchs of the major family clans stood up abruptly and looked at Han Shuo in panic. A chilly wind blew into the hall and tore apart a thin, crystalline barrier. A few energy towers at the side of the hall suddenly exploded. Energy crystals that looked like icy jade scattered all over the floor. In an instant, all the defensive forces in the hall collapsed. A sinister and ruthless energy replaced all the elemental energies and filled every corner of the hall. The patriarchs of the major family clans of Witherbone City felt a chill in their hearts. They couldn't muster any elemental energy to defend or attack effectively. With a calm expression, Han Shuo walked over step by step, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll in his own courtyard. You? It's you? Hill's heart sank. His expression slightly changed. He said in a somewhat hurried voice, "Didn't you leave Witherbone City? Why did you come back?" Han Shuo had destroyed all the defensive forces as soon as he appeared. It was obvious that he didn't come with good intentions. Hill knew that his strength was far inferior to Han Shuo's. He didn't have the confidence to face Han Shuo. Good. Everyone is here. It saves me the trouble of making a few trips. Looking around, Han Shuo discovered that all the enemies of the House of Han that Degassi had mentioned were gathered together. Not a single one was missing. Brian, what are you trying to do? Isn't it over? What else do you want? Hill's eyes flickered. He felt that it would be difficult for him to get away with it. How can it be over if you are still alive? Han Shuo couldn't help but laugh. When Hill's expression suddenly changed, Han Shuo had already calmly launched an attack. Gusts of chilly wind blew over. The celestial demon flame shuttle, which had been refined, whizzed out. It was covered in ghostly flames and hit Hill's chest. Han Shuo condensed his consciousness. Hundreds of demon generals flew out and surrounded the patriarchs of the major family clans. The demon generals howled and wailed as they bore into the bodies of the patriarchs and started gnawing at their flesh, bones, and brains. These demon generals that flew out from the cauldron of myriad demon were refined from the divine souls of mid-gods or high gods. 50 to 60 of them entered a person's body at the same time and immediately devoured the person's blood essence, brain, and bone marrow. The person was instantly subdued. A single demon general might not be able to do much to these patriarchs, but when dozens of demon generals, some of which were refined from high god divine souls, attacked at the same time, the patriarchs of the Witherbone City were no match for them. In just a few moments, the demon generals had devoured the flesh, brains, and bone marrow of the patriarchs of the Witherbone City. All that was left of the patriarchs of the Witherbone City was their shriveled and smelly skin. They lay lifelessly on the ground. Demon generals possessed the ability to evolve. The more flesh, brains, and marrow they devoured, the faster their strength would increase. The most powerful spirit demons could even be refined into outer body incarnations when they evolved to a certain level, possessing some of the divine abilities of the main body. Other than flesh, blood, brain, and bone marrow, the soul was the true source of nourishment for demon generals. However, as these souls could be used to refine new demon generals, the cauldron of myriad demon controlled them and did not allow them to devour the souls of high gods. Under the cauldron of myriad demons' control, a few dusky shadows returned to Han Shua's body, and the demon generals flew back. The only person left in the meeting hall was Hill, who was howling in agony under the flames of the celestial demon flame shuttle. The newly refined celestial demon flame shuttle was incredibly powerful. In Han Shua's hands, it was even more elusive. Hill's skin and flesh were burning under the greenish ghostly flames. Even his divine soul could not escape the refinement of the ghostly flames. Wisps of green flames appeared in his pupils. While Hill was howling in agony, Han Shua suddenly made his move. His 5 fingers pierced straight into Hill's skull. The hard skull was like the softest piece of tofu under Han Shua's 5 fingers. There was not the slightest bit of resistance. Hill's 5 fingers sank deep into Hill's brain. 5 exquisite energies wrapped around Hill's soul that was pulsating in the ghostly flames. Not only could Hill's soul not break free, but it also lost the ability to transmit messages. Strands of consciousness flew into Hill's soul through his fingers. Han Shua accurately located a mark in a corner of Hill's soul. The mark was emitting a dense aura of death. It was incompatible with Hill's soul, but it was also releasing strands of weak energy that stimulated Hill's soul. Han Shua immediately knew that it was an overgod mark left in Hill's soul by the overgod of death. After carefully sensing it, he sensed a desolate, powerful, and ancient aura from the overgod mark. He knew very well what the overgod's imprint did in Hill's divine soul. He also knew that the overgod's imprint would immediately be notified of Hill's death, and everything that happened here would be transmitted to the overgod of the Death Dominion. After carefully avoiding the overgod mark, Han Shua's strands of consciousness drilled into Hill's soul. Just like how he did with Li Wei, he erased Hill's memories, turning Hill's divine soul into a pure soul devoid of consciousness. Hill's soul then flew out of Han Shua's body with Hill's soul and was stored in a special container. Having cultivated demonic arts to the level of Han Shua, his understanding of the soul far surpassed that of the gods of life, death, and destiny on Elysium. Han Shua's marvelous consciousness allowed him to do whatever he wanted to a soul. This was a power that not even an overgod could achieve. In order to avoid incurring the wrath of the overgod of death, Han Shua thought of a way to erase all of Hill's self-awareness. This way, while Hill's soul would still exist, all of his memories as Hill would be gone. From another perspective, Hill would be dead. Without his own consciousness, Hill could not report his experience to the Death Overgod through the Overgod's imprint. Because his soul was still there, the Death Overgod would think that Hill was still alive and would not think that his soul had actually undergone a tremendous change. This way, the Death Overgod would not know about it immediately. Of course, Han Shua knew that there was no way to hide the truth. It was only a matter of time before news of Hill's death spread. By the time the truth was revealed, the city lords of other cities in the Death Dominion would naturally report to the Overgod of Death. But to Han Shua, this period of time was more than enough. He could head to the Darkness Dominion and take care of the enemies of the Han family such as Wallace, Larrickson, and Hofs. By then, even if the Overgods of Darkness and Death learned of the truth, Han Shua would be able to retreat. Looking at Hill's divine soul that was stored in a special container, Han Shua suddenly thought of a way to improve the strength of his family members in the shortest amount of time. Han Shua could erase a high god's self-awareness, erase all his experiences that had nothing to do with the cultivation of energy, and leave only the purest divine soul without self-awareness. Then, he would let the members of the Han family, Emily, and the others fuse with the divine soul without self-awareness. That way, they would be able to gain the understanding and perception of energy that a high god would have. Divine energy was a process of accumulating over a long period of time. It could be rapidly increased through the power of faith in divine essences and the devouring method used by god hunters. However, one's realm was the biggest obstacle that hindered one's progress. If one's realm was not up to par, no matter how much divine energy one accumulated, one would not be able to break through the shackles of one's current realm. But if one's realm was up to par, as long as one's divine energy could keep up with one's divine energy, it would only be a matter of course for one to make a breakthrough. By relying on his mastery of the energy of the soul, Han Shuo was fully capable of erasing the irrelevant memories of a high god's divine soul and destroying that person's self-awareness, leaving behind only a pure divine soul with a comprehension of energy. The members of the Han family could fuse with such a divine soul and gain the understanding and perception of energy in a single step. After a series of thoughts flashed through Han Shuo's mind, he suddenly realized that this was definitely the fastest way to greatly improve the strength of the Han family. After pondering for a moment, Han Shuo was certain that this idea was absolutely feasible. He was so happy that he wanted to raise his head to the sky and let out a long roar. Only someone who cultivated in demonic arts and had such a profound mastery of the energy of the soul could do such a heaven-defying thing. With this method, Han Shuo could see the scene of all the members of the Han family becoming high gods. All the patriarchs of the major family clans in Witherbone City were killed before him. City Lord Hill's soul was erased, and he became a living specimen in Han Shuo's container without any memories. Han Shuo did not stay in the City Lord's mansion for too long. After killing all the people, he calmly left and disappeared without a trace. After leaving Witherbone City, Han Shuo picked up his speed and headed towards the Darkness Dominion. 7 days later, Han Shuo arrived at the largest city in the Darkness Dominion, the City of Gorging Clouds. Han Shuo's target this time was Larrickson of the House of Broadhurst. Larrickson of the House of Broadhurst had once ambushed him in Hefford. He possessed late-stage high god strength and cultivated in the Edict of Destruction. Because of what happened to his son, Han Shuo knew that Larrickson would not spare him or the Han family. What happened to the Han family had proven this point. To prevent future troubles, Han Shuo had to get rid of Larrickson. Originally, Han Shuo thought that with his strength, killing Larrickson at the House of Broadhurst should be a piece of cake. But when Han Shuo got close to the House of Broadhurst, he realized that it might not be as easy as it was in Witherbone City. The defensive boundary of the House of Broadhurst was incomparably complex. Endless darkness shrouded the House of Broadhurst. Regardless of whether it was day or night, the dense element of darkness would never disperse. With just one glance, Han Shuo knew that the wall of darkness of the House of Broadhurst was not something that a high god could deploy. He could faintly sense an enormous amount of darkness aura from the House of Broadhurst. The rumors are true. City Lord Yaris of the City of Gorging Clouds has entered the Overgod realm, mumbled Han Shuo as he gazed at the House of Broadhurst that was shrouded in darkness. Chapter 905. Of all the cities in the Darkness Dominion, the City of Gorging Clouds was without a doubt the most powerful city in the Darkness Dominion. There were countless high gods in the city. Be it Hoff's Hushvale City or Wallace's City of Shadows, they were far inferior to the City of Gorging Clouds. The overall strength of the House of Saint might not even be as great as any of the major family clans in the City of Gorging Clouds, much less the House of Broadhurst. All along, there had been rumors that Yaris, the City Lord of the City of Gorging Clouds, had surpassed High God Realm. However, rumors were just rumors. As Yaris had always kept a low profile and had delegated many of the city's affairs to his trusted aides, as well as those who had seen him could not tell the difference between an overgod and a high god, the rumors were never verified. However, when Han Shuo stood in front of the Broadhurst residence and sensed the boundless darkness shrouding the residence, he immediately realized that Yaris had indeed reached the realm of Overgod. The endless dark elements hovering above the Broadhurst residence were all attracted by Yaris. Using the energy towers in every corner of the Broadhurst residence, Yaris could gather a large amount of dark elements for his own use. The gods cultivating in the energy of darkness in the Broadhurst residence could more or less benefit from it. Han Shuo, who was about to attack Larrickson immediately, stopped in front of the door and bunched his brows when he sensed the powerful aura of darkness surrounding the residence. If the House of Broadhurst didn't have an overgod like Yaris, Han Shuo would have been able to sneak into the residence and kill Larrickson without alerting anyone. However, Yaris' strength had exceeded Han Shuo's expectations. It was nearly impossible for Han Shuo to sneak into the residence undetected. If Han Shuo were to be discovered, he would be attacked by Yaris. Of course, Han Shuo wasn't afraid of Yaris, but if Yaris were to attack, it would disrupt Han Shua's plan. With an overgod and the high gods of the Broadhurst family present, Yaris would have a very slim chance of killing Larixin under Yaris' protection. Not only that, the news of Han Shua's return to the Darkness Dominion would also be exposed. Wallace and Hafs might hide for a while after learning that Han Shua had returned. This would bring many uncertainties to Han Shua's operation. After hesitating for a moment, Han Shua decided not to barge into the residence of Broadhurst. He would wait until Larixin had left. Although Yaris was the city lord of the City of Gorging Clouds, he wholeheartedly focused on his cultivation. Most of the city's affairs were handled by his family members. As Yaris' younger brother, Larixin was naturally burdened with mundane affairs. It was impossible for him to stay in the Broadhurst residence for too long. Han Shua retreated to the City of Gorging Clouds and inquired about Larixin's whereabouts. He learned that Larixin was indeed in the City of Gorging Clouds and was staying with the House of Broadhurst. After receiving accurate information, Han Shua returned to the residence of Broadhurst and patiently waited for Larixin to show up. 3 days later, at dusk, Larixin and a few divine guards of the House of Broadhurst finally left the residence of Gorging Clouds. They seemed to be on a mission and headed straight for the city gate. Han Shua thought to himself, "Even the heavens are helping me." He quietly followed behind Larixin. Just as he expected, Larixin and the experts from the House of Broadhurst had left the City of Gorging Clouds and were heading towards one of their strongholds. Halfway through the journey, Larixin suddenly felt his heart palpitate. Before he could react, Han Shua had appeared from the darkness. "Long time no see, Larixin." "Hee, it's good to see you again." Han Shua's voice reverberated in the air. Suddenly, a shadowy figure materialized in the air and appeared before Larixin. "It's you," Larixin cried out in surprise. Before his voice faded, his space ring flashed and the space in front of him was torn apart. Without a word, Larixin dived into the torn space. Han Shua did not expect that Larixin would be so cowardly that he would tear apart space and escape without even finishing his sentence. This was completely out of Han Shua's expectation. Han Shua's face jolted. He knew that it was too late to stop Larixin. He let out a cold groan and shot into the torn space in Larixin's space ring like a bolt of lightning. Dazzling light filled his surroundings. After a moment of dizziness, Han Shua found himself in an area covered by layers upon layers of boundaries. Larixin, Hafs, Wallace, and Ralph were all standing beside him with sneers on their faces. Larixin, Hafs, Wallace, and Ralph were among them. Han Shua turned his consciousness and raised his head to look at the boundless aura of darkness above him. He immediately realized that he had fallen into a trap meticulously laid out by his enemies. "Brian, welcome to the Broadhurst residence of the City of Gorging Clouds. We have been waiting for you for a long time," said Yaris in a faint smile. Yaris wore a faint smile as he looked at Han Shua and said in a soft voice. His body was shrouded in the aura of darkness. As the city lord of the City of Gorging Clouds, the most powerful city in the Darkness Dominion, Yaris naturally possessed the bearing of someone who held a high position. Coupled with his power as an overgod, he possessed an indescribably unique bearing. Han Shua was in an area surrounded by layers of boundaries. There were a dozen high gods outside the boundaries. Among them, 5 were late-stage high gods like Hafs and Wallace. The rest were mid-stage high gods. Most of them cultivated in the energy of darkness. They wore cold smiles on their faces as they looked at Han Shua as though he was a turtle in a jar. "What a trick! To think that you would use such a trick to lure me in." Han Shua took a deep breath and looked at the boastful Yaris. He said, "Such a scheme and such means are truly extraordinary. Yaris, you are indeed the city lord of the City of Gorging Clouds. No wonder characters like Hafs and Wallace are no match for you. The strength of an entire city can't even compare to a family clan of yours." "Shut up," shouted Hafs coldly. He looked at Han Shua and said in a deep voice, "How dare you be so stubborn even in the face of death? With City Lord Yaris here today, no matter how powerful he is, he will not be able to walk out of here alive." "Brian, I didn't want to make an enemy out of you, but you have been forcing my hand. sighed Wallace helplessly at Han Shua. Han Shua couldn't help but laugh. He turned his gaze to Wallace and said, I forced you? Ha, what a joke. Ever since I came to the City of Shadows, I have saved Carmelita twice and helped your House of Saint many times. Ever since the Han family established themselves in the City of Shadows, I knew that you wouldn't allow the Han family to continue developing. I was even prepared to leave the City of Shadows with the Han family. But you, Hoffs and Larrickson, have the nerve to say that I am forcing you? How amusing. The City of Shadows will forever belong to the House of Saint. As the patriarch of the House of Saint, I have to exterminate anyone who can threaten the House of Saint. Wallace was rendered speechless by Han Shua's words. I have given you face, but you don't want it. Han Shua put on a cold smile and shook his head. He knew that he had nothing to say to Wallace. Larrickson, Wallace, Hoffs, Ralph. Very good, very good. Everyone is here. Han Shua's gaze swept across them one by one and finally landed on Yaris, the city lord of the City of Gorging Clouds. He smilingly asked, You have meticulously planned all this. Why haven't you made your move? Yaris put on a carefree smile and said to Han Shua in an incomparably sincere manner, Brian, I have long heard of your great name. It seems that you live up to your reputation. But I, Yaris, am willing to allow your Han family to settle in the City of Gorging Clouds. As long as you are willing to let go of your hatred towards Larrickson, I will welcome your Han family on behalf of the entire City of Gorging Clouds. I can assure you that what happened to Wallace will never happen again. Yaris spoke with great sincerity. He didn't seem to be joking, which was completely out of Han Shua's expectations. Elder brother, how can you do that? He killed your nephew and many experts of your House of Broadhurst. How can you allow him to enter the City of Gorging Clouds? Before Han Shua could say anything, Larrickson was the first to panic. He roared at Yaris in panic. Shut up, shouted Yaris. Larrickson, who had always been arrogant in the Darkness Dominion, immediately shut his mouth. It appeared that Yaris had been in the House of Broadhurst for a long time, that even Larrickson feared him. You and Field were the ones who started this. You provoked him first. It is only natural that you suffer a little, said Yaris with a frown. Yaris frowned and scolded Larrickson. Compared to an over-god, your son's life can be ignored. You have plenty of energy anyway. Just give birth to a few more. Big, elder brother. Larrickson was stunned, and he wanted to say something. Yaris' face turned cold. He waved his hand and said, That's enough. I know what to do. Cut the crap. Larrickson, who was full of complaints, dared not utter a word after being reprimanded by Yaris. He lowered his head and glared at Han Shua with hatred in his eyes. Wallace and Hoffs were astonished. Yaris clearly did not discuss this with them. They looked at Yaris with sparkling eyes, as though they wanted an explanation from Yaris. Brian, as long as you are willing to come to my City of Gorging Clouds, I will write off all our grudges. Not only that, I will provide you with a manor, manpower, and resources that are much better than what you had in the City of Shadows. Anything that your celestial pearl needs, I will provide. What do you think? Said Yaris as he looked at Han Shua expectantly. Han Shua was secretly impressed by Yaris' way of doing things. However, he still shook his head resolutely and said smilingly, Thank you for your kindness. After what happened in the City of Shadows, my Han family will never submit to anyone again. Chapter 906. Back when Han Shua left the City of Shadows, he had made up his mind that he would never bow down to anyone again. Although Yaris was much more magnanimous than Wallace, Han Shua was not willing to bet his Han family on the City of Gorging Clouds. Moreover, Han Shua was not impressed by Yaris' strength. How could Han Shua be willing to submit to Yaris' City of Gorging Clouds? Yaris shook his head and sighed in disappointment when he heard Han Shua's refusal. However, Larrickson, Hoffs, and Wallace heaved a sigh of relief. It was as though a heavy burden had been lifted from their hearts. He really doesn't know what's good for him. Elder brother, there's no need to waste your breath on him. He deserves to die. Larrickson laughed. Yaris looked at Han Shua regretfully and helplessly said, I was sincere in inviting you to join the City of Gorging Clouds. But since you have refused, I have no choice but to kill you right here and now. My family will not allow an expert like you to live. My apologies. Don't worry about it. Show me what you have got. Let's see if you can keep me here today," said Han Shuo in a heroic manner. He did not seem to be worried at all. Layers upon layers of boundaries had isolated all elemental energies. Even space itself seemed to be frozen solid. Even an expert who cultivated in the Edict of Space and possessed a space scroll would not be able to unleash it. It appeared that Yaris and the others had come up with a foolproof plan to block off all avenues of escape for Han Shuo. "Brian, you can't escape. The boundaries here can stop anyone from leaving. Unless you can break through the 120 layers, you can only passively receive our attacks," said Wallace mockingly as he looked coldly at Han Shuo. "Wallace, you haven't told Carmelita and Andre that you and Ralph have come to the City of Gorging Clouds, have you? Haha, what do you think they will think if they know that you are going to do this to me?" Han Shuo put on a relaxed smile. Wallace's expression slightly changed when he heard Han Shuo mention Carmelita and Andre. It appeared that Han Shuo had touched a sore spot. "I will take care of the affairs of the House of Saint. You don't have to worry about it." Carmelita and Andre are short-sighted and have been bewitched by your flowery words. However, it is only a matter of time before they realize all that I have done for the House of Saint," Wallace said with a sullen face. Rather than reprimanding Han Shuo, those words were more like comforting himself. Han Shuo nodded and did not say anything else. He had brought up Carmelita and Andre not because he hoped that Wallace would let him go, but because he wanted to confirm with Wallace that Carmelita and Andre knew nothing about the matter. This way, at least, Han Shuo would not be too disappointed. Emily and Phoebe had previously told him that they had not received any response after sending out their distress letters. The hearts of men were sinister, and he was not sure if Andre and Carmelita were involved in this matter. Now that Wallace had denied it himself, Han Shuo knew that the two of them were indeed unaware. As for Aobashi and Erebus, as they were sent away, Han Shuo was certain that they knew nothing about what happened in Fort Lossberg. "Now that things have come to this, there is no need for me to hold back," Han Shuo said. Yaris knew that there was no point in trying to persuade Han Shuo any further. He softly instructed, "Darkwater, Darkstone, please come over here." Two dark figures suddenly appeared beside Yaris. They were dressed in black and had gloomy faces. They looked exactly the same and cultivated in the energy of darkness. Although they were both late-stage high gods, the closer they stood to one another, the stronger the energy of darkness on their bodies became. It was a very peculiar phenomenon. Darkwater and Darkstone were twin brothers. They were the city lords of Blackwater City and Blackrock City, respectively. The twins were second only to Yaris in fame in the City of Shadows. It was said that the god of darkness had placed an identical brand in their divine souls. When the two joined forces, they could unleash extraordinary power. The twins were telepathically connected. They cultivated in the energy of darkness and were both late-stage high gods. Furthermore, they were imbued with the same brand by the god of darkness. It was only because they were identical that their combined strength would multiply. Han Shuo slightly bunched his brows when he saw Darkwater and Darkstone. His face turned a little grave. Han Shuo, of course, knew that the two had been hiding in the dark. However, as the two were in two different directions, Han Shuo did not pay too much attention to them as they were just two high gods. However, when the two suddenly dashed out from the darkness and closed the distance between them, Han Shuo suddenly discovered that the divine energy in their bodies had increased by an unbelievable amount. The aura of darkness on their bodies was rapidly converging. When the two stood beside Yaris, Han Shuo discovered that the aura of darkness and divine energy in their bodies had far surpassed that of Hafs and Wallace. Although it was not as dense as Yaris' overgod realm, it was clearly beyond the realm of high gods. Yaris alone was already rather difficult to deal with. Now that the two city lords had joined the fray, and there were more than 100 layers of boundaries, Han Shuo immediately realized that it would be much more difficult to break through the layers of boundaries. "Brian, I will ask you one more time. Do you really want to be my enemy?" The smile on Yaris' face slowly faded. His expression became unprecedentedly grave. He had revealed all his trump cards in the hope that Han Shuo would be able to see the situation clearly. Han Shuo laughed involuntarily and said to Yaris, "Do you really think you can trap me with the addition of the two of them?" Yaris shook his head and replied, "Not trap you, but kill you. Haha, let's see how you plan to kill me." Han Shuo laughed heartily. He raised his head to look at the dark aura that was pressing down on him and said, "Do you really think that my strength will decrease just because you have isolated all elemental energies in this area? Haha, come, let me see what you have up your sleeves." The elements in this space were isolated, and there was only an endless amount of dark energy in all directions, like a black mountain pressing down on them. Any other god cultivating in the elemental energy would have their strength greatly reduced in this isolated area. They would have to rely on the divine energy in their bodies to resist. Without the replenishment of elemental energy, every ounce of divine energy that was consumed would be depleted. Once the divine energy in one's body was depleted, even the strongest expert would become extremely weak. Then, they would be at the mercy of others and become meat on a chopping board. Good. He is indeed a formidable character, but it is a pity that he will die here today. Yaris praised. He turned to Darkwada, Darkstone, Hafs, and Wallace and said, "I will deploy the black hole vortex. All you need to do is pour your darkness divine energy into the vortex from the sky, and you will be able to continuously increase the power of the black hole vortex. When the black hole vortex comes crashing down, all the dark energy will mince everything in its path in the most frenzied manner. He will die without a doubt." Darkwada, Darkstone, Wallace, Hafs, and a few other experts cultivating in the energy of darkness nodded in understanding. They knew how powerful Yaris was and how terrifying his ultimate skill, the black hole vortex, was. Yaris said no more. He suddenly closed his eyes and sat on the spot. Wisps of gloomy aura flew out from his body and fell into the endless darkness shrouding the boundary. As soon as the wisps of dark energy were injected into the absolute darkness above Han Shuo's head, the aura of darkness seemed to be pushed by many forces and formed a vortex that slowly rotated. At the same time, Darkwada, Darkstone, Wallace, and Hafs, who had long been prepared, did not stand idle. Wisps of dark energy flew out from their bodies and landed on the area above Han Shuo. They fell into the vortex that had just started rotating. After the energy of darkness flew out from Darkwada and Darkstone's bodies, they strangely twisted together like hemp ropes. The two's energies became several times more powerful than Hafs and Wallace's energies alone. They were 10 times more powerful than the combined energies of Hafs and Wallace. Wisps of dark energy were injected into the vortex above Han Shuo's head. The originally slow rotation of the vortex grew faster and faster. It was as though the void above Han Shuo's head had been torn into an endless black hole. Terrifying energy kept accumulating as though it was going to devour the entire world. Yaris himself was an overgod. Darkwada and Darkstone were extremely powerful when they joined forces. In addition to Hafs, Wallace, and a few other powerful high gods, their combined strength was beyond Han Shuo's expectations. They were much stronger than when Salas, Wasis, and Han Shuo fought. They had gathered all their energies together, intending to grind Han Shuo into pieces with a single strike. The energy in the vortex of darkness that was accumulating energy grew more and more terrifying. Han Shuo's heart grew heavier and heavier. Han Shuo really couldn't think of a way to deal with this frightening force. The 17 flying swords had long flown out of his body and were bombarding the 100+ layers of boundaries that bound the space. However, the 100+ layers of boundaries were extremely tough. The 17 flying swords simply couldn't destroy them all at once. Fight! In that split second, Han Shuo made up his mind. He finally decided to use all of his and Cauldron Spirit's power. The 17 flying swords no longer bombarded the layers of boundaries. Han Shuo withdrew them and sat cross-legged on the ground. The demonic infant, the foundation of demonic arts cultivation, slowly flew out from his body. Thousands of strands of his consciousness transformed into rays of dark light and surged into the demonic infant, bestowing all of Han Shuo's essence, energy, and soul to the demonic infant. The demonic infant slowly flew out from the top of Han Shua's head. A phantom identical to Han Shua drifted erratically and grew longer and longer. At the same time, hundreds and thousands of demon generals whizzed out of the cauldron of myriad demon and disappeared into the demonic infant. The demonic infant, which was originally the size of an infant, grew larger and larger after receiving the energy of hundreds and thousands of demon generals. In no time at all, the demonic infant had become a giant that hovered dozens of meters in the air. The terrifying energy of coldness, ruthlessness, and bloodlust suddenly filled the entire city of gorging clouds. The more than 100 layers of boundaries seemed to be unable to obstruct the demonic infant's destructive energy. Hee. The demonic infant suddenly let out a shrill howl after receiving the energy of all the demon generals. The howl broke through the layers of boundaries. In an instant, many gods of the House of Broadhurst bled from their 7 orifices and died on the spot. Chapter 907. Han Shua sat cross-legged on the same spot. He injected his consciousness into the demonic infant, allowing it to possess all of the senses of his main body. After all of his essence, chi, and spirit were injected into the demonic infant, Han Shua's body suddenly became thinner. His skin seemed to have lost some of its luster. His eyes became sunken and lifeless. The method of injecting all of Han Shua's essence, chi, and spirit into the demonic infant allowed the demonic infant to unleash the energy of the demon generals in the cauldron of myriad demon. It was much more thorough than Han Shua's attempt to borrow the demon generals' energy. This was because the demonic infant and demon generals were similar life forms. Not only could the demonic infant absorb as much of the demon general's energy as possible, it could also unleash the demon general's energy to its fullest potential. Before Han Shua's strength had reached the Skybreak realm, his demonic infant wouldn't be able to withstand the power of the myriad demon manifestation. If his realm wasn't high enough, even if he managed to absorb the demon general's energy with his demonic infant, he wouldn't be able to expel the demon general afterwards. Once the demonic infant transformed into a demon, the essence, chi, and spirit of Han Shua's main body would be separated from the demonic infant. Han Shua's main body would become unprecedentedly weak. One mistake, and he would be in grave danger. If Yaris and the others weren't trapped in the layers of barriers, they wouldn't be able to get close to Han Shua in an instant. In addition to the terrifying dark vortex above his head, Han Shua wouldn't have used the myriad demon manifestation, a powerful but dangerous move. Kiki. Shrill howls resounded throughout the city of gorging clouds. The weaker gods of the House of Broadhurst who were closest to the barrier died on the spot with blood gushing out of their 7 orifices. Those who were further away suffered injuries to their hearts and lungs and vomited blood. Yaris and the others who had surrounded Han Shua were the first to bear the brunt of the attack. However, most of them were high gods. They were able to withstand the shrill howls of Han Shua after he transformed into a demon. Their minds were shaken and their bodies trembled slightly. What is it? Hoff's face suddenly jolted. His mind was seized by something and he cried out in alarm. Not only Hoff's, but Ralph, Wallace, Blackwater, Blackstone, and the others were also shocked. They could sense the terror of the giant demon floating in the air from the layers of barriers. Humans would instinctively fear the unknown, and they were no exception. Yaris, whose realm surpassed high gods, was the only one who remained unfazed. He shouted, "We don't need to worry about what it is. Everyone, concentrate your energy and inject it into the dark vortex. No matter what it is, we will destroy it soon." Yaris' calmness seemed to have infected those people. After hearing his words, they all calmed down and no longer talked in panic. One by one, they continued to pour the dark energy in their bodies into the vortex of darkness above Han Shua's head. As they continued to pour their darkness divine energy into the vortex of darkness above Han Shua's head began to spin faster and faster as it slowly descended upon Han Shua. Han Shua, who had transformed into a demon, let out a shrill howl. His enormous body hovered in the air between incorporeal and incorporeal as he abruptly landed on the ground behind his main body. With a loud rumble, the entire ground of the Broadhurst residence trembled as if a great earthquake had occurred. Even Yaris' heart sank when he heard the trembling of the earth. Previously, he had thought that the gigantic Han Shuo was just an illusory body and that there was nothing to be afraid of. But when the entire Broadhurst residence began to tremble, he immediately realized that the terrifying gigantic Han Shuo was real and not an illusory body at all. The other Han Shuo, who had gathered all the demon general's energy in the cauldron of myriad demon through his demonic infant, raised his head to the sky and threw a punch. At this moment, the violent power revealed its sharpness. This punch was so heavy that even Yaris and the others, who were separated by 100 barriers, felt a chill in their hearts. Bang! Yaris, Blackwater, Blackstone, and the others joined forces to cast 120 boundaries. Under the tremendous impact, dozens of boundaries and seals were blasted apart, leaving a millstone-sized crater in the air. With one punch, more than half of the boundaries and seals binding the area were destroyed. However, Han Shuo did not stop there. He laughed sinisterly and threw another punch. Bang! Dozens of layers of the boundaries were blasted apart. Not good. Attack with all your strength. I'm going to trap the dark vortex. Yaris' expression changed. He knew that if he threw another punch at Han Shuo, all the boundaries binding the area would collapse. Once Han Shuo walked out of that area, the dark vortex might not be able to accurately trap Han Shuo. Blackwater, Blackstone, and Wallace were alarmed. Under Yaris' command, they attacked with all their might. Streams of dark energy flew into the air, gathering more and more power in the dark vortex. The dark vortex no longer approached Han Shuo slowly. As if the sky was falling, it suddenly enveloped Han Shuo. After transforming into a demon, Han Shuo was dozens of meters tall, which was already very large. However, the dark vortex created by Yaris and the others was even larger. It covered the sky above Han Shuo's head. Once it fell, Han Shuo would have nowhere to hide. Yaris, Darkwater, Darkstone, and the others had expended their divine energy to form layers upon layers of boundaries and seals. All of them were materialized using the divine energy of darkness. Therefore, the boundaries and seals that were able to firmly bind Han Shuo to this place were not hindered in the slightest by the dark vortex that was of the same origin. Not only that, when the two collided, the dark energy that was attached to the boundaries and seals immediately surged into the dark vortex, further boosting its power. Before Han Shuo could punch a third time, the dark vortex suddenly enveloped the transformed Han Shuo. The divine power that Yaris and the others had gathered in the dark vortex tore and strangled Han Shuo in an instant, trying to grind Han Shuo into pieces. Strands of dark energy surged into Han Shuo's demonic body in an instant, filling every demon general that made up his enormous body. In the blink of an eye, Han Shuo's enormous body was torn to shreds, spinning continuously within the dark vortex. The space around Han Shuo spun, and the earth spun. Under the terrifying energy, the space collapsed with a loud bang. Strange and blurry colors suddenly shot through the void. At a glance, one could even see stars that were immeasurably far away. The dark vortex formed by Yaris could not only cause damage to physical space, but also to souls. The divine sense gathered on the demonic infant was also torn to pieces and torn apart repeatedly. The dark vortex disappeared as quickly as it came. It tore apart Han Shuo's consciousness in the blink of an eye. Then, in a flash, it vanished without a trace in that strange and blurry space-time rift. All the boundaries disappeared, and the blurred light above his head suddenly calmed down. There was nothing special in that area. Only Han Shuo's body sat motionless. After losing the demon infant, divine sense, and spirit, his main body had sunken eyes, a sallow face, and no signs of life. The dark vortex could only last for an instant. All the energy was concentrated on the other Han Shuo. Therefore, Han Shuo's main body was unscathed and unaffected by the vortex. Yaris heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. That was close. If we had allowed him to escape, our dark vortex wouldn't have been effective. This guy is too powerful. Once he escapes, there will be endless troubles in the future. Big brother, what about the other body? Larrickson pointed at Han Shua's main body. All of his power has been drained, and even his soul is gone. What use is this body? Yaris shook his head and said regretfully, "It's a pity that he possesses such mysterious power at such a young age. If I could use him, the strength of the Darkness Dominion would soar. Just in case, I destroyed that body as well." Wallace wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeves before cautiously walking towards Han Shua's body. It seemed that Wallace was the one who wanted to kill Han Shua the most. He didn't even want to let go of the only body he had left. "Don't worry, that guy is done for. His divine sense will be ground to pieces in the dark vortex. Be it a physical body or an incorporeal body, he won't be able to escape." Yaris couldn't help but laugh when he saw that Wallace was still so cautious. He didn't think much of Wallace's cautiousness. Wallace laughed awkwardly at Yaris's words. "It's better to be cautious. This kid isn't easy to deal with." Under everyone's watchful eyes, Wallace slowly walked towards Han Shua's body. When he was only a few dozen meters away from Han Shua's body, he was considering whether he should attack from a distance. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded in the void. "You're courting death." All of a sudden, innumerable strands of gray aura frantically converged. Strands of demon general energy that had been scattered between heaven and earth surged back in an instant. Han Shua, who had been smashed to smithereens without a trace, reappeared in the void in the blink of an eye. "Hee, you want to kill me? Too early." Han Shua laughed heartily. His huge palm shot out like lightning and grabbed Wallace, who was about to destroy his body. With a strong grip, Wallace's body was reduced to a blood bar. Yaris's dark vortex was so powerful that even overgod souls like Salas and Wasis would not be able to withstand it. They would be torn to pieces by the dark vortex. However, Han Shua's consciousness could be divided into thousands of strands and could change infinitely. Even if 10,000 strands were torn apart, he could still reassemble them. How could this dark vortex hurt his consciousness? It wasn't just Han Shua's consciousness. Even the souls of the thousands of demon generals were unharmed. The moment the dark vortex enveloped him, Han Shua's consciousness split into thousands of strands and mixed with the demon general souls. They split at the same time and escaped the attack of the dark vortex. Han Shua, who was in the thousand demon form, was formed from tens of thousands of strands of consciousness and thousands of demon generals. Since he could form into a demon, he was naturally not afraid of splitting. How could this dark vortex, which could tear him to pieces, destroy him completely? Chapter 908. If it wasn't for his absolute confidence, Han Shua wouldn't have let his demonic infant out of his body to resist Yaris' dark vortex. After all, the demonic infant and the consciousness were the foundation of Han Shua existence. If either of them were to die, Han Shua would be in big trouble. Han Shua's consciousness and demon generals converged as Han Shua transformed once more. Wallace, who was about to destroy Han Shua's main body, was crushed to pieces by Han Shua. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, Han Shua took a deep breath and sucked Wallace's divine soul into his stomach. He would refine Wallace's divine soul into a demon general in the cauldron of myriad demon after everything was over. The series of events happened in the blink of an eye. Before Yaris, Darkwada, Darkstone, and the others could react, Wallace had been killed by Han Shua. How could this be? Yaris revealed a look of panic for the first time. As far as he knew, the destruction of a divine soul meant death. The destruction of a divine soul was even more thorough than the destruction of a divine body. A god who had lost his divine soul would have vanished from the face of the earth. He did not expect that the demonic arts cultivated by Han Shua could divide his consciousness into thousands of strands, reassemble them into a soul with a thought, and then scatter them into strands of memories with a thought. Naturally, the gods of Elysium would never be able to comprehend such a miraculous divine ability. Haha, now that all the boundaries are gone, let's see how you're going to stop me. Han Shua raised his head and laughed maniacally. He stomped his foot, and the Broadhurst residence violently shook. The 17 flying swords in Han Shua's body whizzed out and chased after Hofs, Ralph, Larrickson, and the others. Han Shuo, who was formed from the demonic infant and demon generals, took enormous strides and charged at Yaris amidst deafening rumbles. Along the way, the earth quaked and the mountains trembled. Houses near the Broadhurst residence collapsed one after another. Many gods of the Broadhurst residence nearby vomited mouthfuls of blood and died tragically under Han Shuo's terrifying rumbles. Yaris turned pale with fright as he watched the enormous Han Shuo charge at him. He gathered the energy of darkness and enveloped the entire Broadhurst residence. In the blink of an eye, the clear sky was completely covered in darkness and the darkness pressed down on Han Shuo. Haha, you're still using this trick? Han Shuo laughed heartily. Suddenly, he raised his head to the sky and howled once again. The howl carried a bizarre magical energy that could tear one's eardrums. It spread out wave after wave, and actually affected the gathering of the dark energy. The darkness that blotted out the sky was forcibly torn apart by the howl. Ralph, who only possessed mid-stage high god strength, was no match for Han Shuo. Now that Han Shuo's strength had advanced to the Skybreak realm, he was the first to die. Ralph was followed by Hafs and Larixen. The 17 flying swords intertwined to form an enormous, chilling net. Chilly winds blew inside the net. The energy of frost and corrosion was pushed to the extreme. Hafs, Larixen, Blackstone, and Darkwater were trapped in the enormous net. After Ralph, Hafs, Larixen, and Larixen were also caught in the net. The 17 flying swords intertwined to form a gigantic, chilling net. The energy of frost and corrosion was pushed to the extreme. Hafs, Larixen, Blackstone, and Darkwater were trapped in the giant net. No matter how hard they tried, they could not break free. The 17 flying swords intertwined with each other and moved faster and faster. The space they were trapped in was getting smaller and smaller. Once the 17 flying swords converged into a single point, all those trapped in the Skybreak net would be annihilated in body and soul. The 17 flying swords intertwined with each other and moved faster and faster. The space they were trapped in was getting smaller and smaller. Once the 17 flying swords converged into a single point, all those trapped in the Skybreak net would be annihilated in body and soul. Ah! Hafs and Larixen let out 2 screams in succession. Darkwater, Darkstone, how dare you attack us? Hafs' face was pale. He bellowed and attacked desperately against Darkwater and Blackstone in a room-sized space. This place is only so big. If you die first, we brothers will be able to live for a while longer. Darkwater's face was gloomy as he and Darkstone attacked with all their might. The 2 brothers had utterly defeated Hafs and Larixen. It wouldn't be long before they killed Hafs and Larixen. The Skybreak net would constantly shrink, and it would take some time for the 17 flying swords to intertwine with each other. Therefore, the Skybreak net would shrink over time. Hafs, Larixen, Darkwater, and Darkstone were the only ones trapped in the Skybreak net. By the time the Skybreak net shrank to a certain size, it wouldn't be able to hold all 4 of them. Therefore, in order to survive for a while longer, Darkwater and Darkstone decided to launch a sneak attack on Larixen and Hafs when the net of sky had not shrunk to a certain extent. Darkwater and Darkstone were slightly stronger than Larixen and Hafs in the first place. Not to mention that they had launched a sneak attack on Larixen and Hafs. As a result, Larixen and Hafs were severely injured. Haha, interesting, interesting. Han Shuo, who had been continuously pressuring Yaris in his demon form, laughed heartily. He did not expect that these people would actually kill each other at such a crucial moment. This was completely out of his expectations. Darkwater, Darkstone, how dare you? I won't let you get away with this. When Yaris saw that Larixen was gravely injured and on the verge of death, he shouted sternly, Larixen, Yaris, you still have the cheek to speak? If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have ended up like this, sneered Darkwater. He mercilessly pierced a pitch-black awl through Larixen's head. Darkstone was not much slower than Larixen. He punched at the wounded Hafs and sent him flying into Han Shuo's Skybreak net. As soon as Hafs fell into the net, his divine body immediately emitted thick smoke. His skin and flesh rapidly decayed. It was obvious that he would not survive. Brother, Yaris was enraged. Dense energy of darkness overflowed from his divine body. His domain of divinity expanded and drained all the elements of darkness in the Broadhurst residence in an instant. Under the provocation of Darkwater and Darkstone, Yaris seemed to have lost his mind. Yaris, who had unleashed all of his overgod energy, decided to go all out. He no longer concealed his overgod energy as he madly attacked Han Shuo. Han Shuo was surprised that Yaris was not afraid of death. He did not expect that Yaris and Larixin had such a deep bond. Han Shuo saw that Yaris was charging at him with no regard for his own life. He suddenly dodged and flew into the air. As expected, when Yaris saw that Han Shuo had dodged, he did not pursue Han Shuo. Instead, he flew past Han Shuo and headed straight for Darkwater and Darkstone, who were trapped in the Skybreak net. It appeared that he was going to kill Darkstone and Darkstone first. Chuckling coldly, Han Shuo withdrew the 17 flying swords that formed the Skybreak net. In the blink of an eye, the 17 flying swords returned to Han Shuo's body. Han Shuo had originally planned to watch Yaris fight Darkwater and Darkstone before sneaking up on Yaris and killing him. However, he suddenly felt that the elements of darkness around him were a little strange. In an instant, the Broadhurst clan, which Yaris had just drained of all the dark elemental energy, was suddenly flooded with hundreds or even thousands of times more dark elemental energy. The dark elemental energy rapidly gathered in the void, and a consciousness that covered the entire city of gorging clouds gradually formed at the center of the gathering dark elemental energy. Han Shuo's expression changed. He immediately gave up on attacking Yaris and Darkwater and Darkstone. He also stopped materializing in the air in his demonic form. The materialized Han Shuo suddenly transformed into an erratic and distorted shadow. In the blink of an eye, he appeared above Yaris' main body that was sitting cross-legged on the ground. Like a wisp of smoke, the demonic form of Han Shuo entered the main body's skull once more. At the same time, the three brothers, Yaris, Darkwater, and Darkstone, who were about to clash, suddenly felt the dark elements in their bodies vanish. The divine energy in their bodies was completely restrained by a terrifying force. The earth-shattering attack of the three suddenly became a brawl between rogues, without any power. With the element of darkness extracted and the divine energy in their bodies restrained, the three city lords of the Darkness Dominion were not even as strong as a base god. When their physical attacks landed on their opponents, they simply could not cause any damage to their opponents. Darkwater, Darkstone, and Yaris were entangled in a battle that was not the least bit aesthetically pleasing. Very soon, the three realized what was happening. Their expressions changed. They stopped fighting and looked up at the sky. Boundless darkness had enveloped the entire city of gorging clouds. It was as though all light had vanished from the city forever. The heavy pressure made it hard for everyone to breathe. The gods that cultivated in the energy of darkness could feel this familiar and intimate power from the depths of their souls. They couldn't help but bow to the ground. Yaris, Darkstone, and Darkwater, the three city lords of the Darkness Dominion, were among those who bowed to the ground. After his consciousness and demonic infant returned to Han Shuo's body, he immediately stood up and sensed the darkness that had enveloped the entire city of gorging clouds. Han Shuo's expression changed. His opponent's power was more than 100 times stronger than that of demigods like Salus and Wasis. Han Shuo knew that he had no chance of winning. Without hesitation, Han Shuo deployed blood disassembly. With a flash of blood-red light, Han Shuo left the city of gorging clouds, drenched in blood. Hafs and Wallace were the two city lords of the Darkness Dominion. One of them must have the Overgod's seal in his divine soul. Their sudden deaths must have alerted the Overgod of Darkness. Therefore, the Overgod from the Darkness Dominion immediately descended upon the city of gorging clouds. An Overgod who possessed the quintessence represented the most fundamental energy of darkness in the universe. He could use all the energy of darkness for himself and understand all the variations of the energy of darkness. He was not someone an Overgod without the quintessence could compare to. In this vast universe, there was only one Overgod of darkness who possessed the quintessence. Han Shuo knew that he wasn't a match for his opponent for the time being. Therefore, he made a prompt decision to flee the city of gorging clouds, even if it meant getting injured. Chapter 909. The City of Gorging Clouds, the Broadhurst Residence. The two city lords, Yaris, Darkwater, and Darkstone, had stopped fighting long ago. They were kneeling on the ground with humble faces as they sensed the divine aura emanating from the darkness above their heads. All the gods cultivating in the energy of darkness in the city of gorging clouds knelt on the ground in panic. Boundless darkness enveloped the city of gorging clouds as if the light had never come. The density of the element of darkness in the city was 100 times higher than usual, forcing the elements of the other elements to temporarily disperse. The other elements in the city were unprecedentedly thin. The darkness above the Broadhurst residence grew denser and denser. It condensed into an enormous, erratic shadow. A solemn, and heavy divine aura suddenly emanated from it, causing the hearts of many to tremble. Yaris, Darkwater, Darkstone, forget about your past grievances. As city lords of the Darkness Dominion, you shall not start a war over such a trivial matter. The deep voice sounded from the sky above the Broadhurst residence. There was no room for negotiation and no room for resistance. The three city lords, who had been fighting fiercely before, all had solemn expressions on their faces as they nodded at this voice. Yaris raised his head and looked at the enormous shadow formed from the purest darkness. He respectfully said, "Over God, Hoffs and Wallace are dead. That man named Brian is a threat to our Darkness Dominion. I do not have absolute confidence that I can defeat him. Please, over God, let him return to the earth. I know what I'm doing. He will not return to the Darkness Dominion. If he dares to enter the Darkness Dominion again, I will personally destroy him." The majestic voice in the sky gave an answer. Soon after, it turned to Yaris and instructed, "Andre of the House of Saint will be the new city lord of the City of Shadows. Field of the House of Lavers will be the new city lord of Hushvale City. Spread the news." Yaris stared blankly for a moment. He didn't understand why the Darkness Overgod didn't personally deal with Han Shuo. From his point of view, even if Han Shuo suddenly disappeared using some miraculous method, as long as the Darkness Overgod wanted to, there was no way Han Shuo could escape from the Darkness Dominion. Is there a problem? Seeing that Yaris did not answer immediately, the dignified voice above his head sounded again. But this time, the voice was slightly louder, giving rise to an unparalleled fear from the bottom of one's heart. Yaris was shocked. He knew that the Overgod's decree was irresistible. He hastily replied, "Andre of the City of Shadows will be the new city lord, but I have no idea where Field of the House of Lavers is. Field used to be in the City of Gorging Clouds." However, after Lerickson's son died at the hands of Han Shuo, Donna left the Broadhurst residence with Field that very night. Lerickson had been searching for the whereabouts of the Lavers family and Field, but to no avail. Yaris had no idea where Field was right now. You don't need to know that. All you have to do is spread the news in Field, and the Lavers family will appear in Hushvale City, said the Overgod of Darkness in an enigmatic voice. Yaris realized that the Overgod of Darkness must have a plan. Field and the Lavers family were driven out of the City of Shadows by Wallace. Ever since they arrived at the City of Gorging Clouds, they had been depressed and frustrated. But after the death of Lerickson's son, they had no choice but to flee again. From Yaris' point of view, the Lavers family only existed in name. He did not expect that the Overgod of Darkness would issue such an order. Although puzzled, Yaris did not dare to disobey the Overgod of Darkness's order. He nodded respectfully. The Overgod of Darkness above his head softly acknowledged. Suddenly, the boundless energy of darkness that shrouded the City of Gorging Clouds receded like a receding tide. Light once again shrouded the City of Gorging Clouds. Yaris heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to Darkwater and Darkstone beside him and said in an unsightly face, "If it wasn't for the Overgod's order, I wouldn't have spared you today." Darkwater rolled his eyes and softly groaned. He said, "Yaris, the two of us traveled thousands of miles to help you out of goodwill. Your brother's death was entirely caused by that Brian. Even if we hadn't done anything, he would still have died. You should have vented your hatred on that fella instead. If it wasn't for the Overgod's appearance, the two of us would have died in the city of gorging clouds. Yaris, we have given you face, said Darkstone in a gloomy face. Humph, if Wallace and Hoffs hadn't promised to give us a crystal mine, would the two of you have come? Yaris sneered and said, forget it. He's already dead, and we have gained nothing. Sigh, why didn't the Overgod kill him? If the Overgod had killed him, he wouldn't have escaped death as long as he's in the Darkness Dominion. Darkwada and Darkstone wore puzzled faces. Darkwada hesitated for a moment before he cautiously raised his head and looked at the sky. He said, I heard from Wallace that that fella has a close relationship with the daughter of the goddess of destiny. Could that be the reason? Yaris' eyes flickered for a moment before he nodded and softly sighed. Forget it. Go back and spread the news. I didn't expect that Hushvale City would be taken over by Field. He sure is lucky. Darkwada and Darkstone also couldn't understand the Overgod of Darkness arrangement. They shook their heads and left the Broadhurst residence. On a barren mountain in the northwest of the city of gorging clouds, Han Shua was panting heavily with blood all over his body. The invincible Omen body automatically protected him. Demonic yuan circulated rapidly within his body. A few seconds later, the torn wound, tendons, and flesh squirmed. Very soon, the incessant flow of blood stopped, and the wound began to scab over at a rapid speed. After reaching the Skybreak realm in demonic arts, the damage caused to the body by using demonic disassembly was no longer a threat. With a single thought, the demonic yuan would heal all the damage to the body. Han Shua would only need some time to fully recover from the injuries he had sustained. After stabilizing his injuries for the time being, he prepared to leave the Darkness Dominion. The sudden arrival of the Overgod of Darkness gave Han Shua a strong sense of danger. He knew that he was no match for the Overgod of Darkness for the time being. Therefore, he had to leave the Darkness Dominion as soon as possible. The power of the Overgod of Darkness was just too terrifying. Han Shua didn't feel safe staying in the Darkness Dominion. Han Shua streaked across the Dominion of Darkness, unleashing all of his energy and flying as fast as he could. 7 days later, Han Shua finally left the Darkness Dominion and arrived at the edge of the Death Dominion. He had killed Wallace, Hoffs, Larrickson, and Ralph. In Han Shua's opinion, he had achieved his goal. Although Han Shua had offended the even more terrifying Yaris, Darkwada, and Darkstone, and might even incur the wrath of the Overgod of Darkness, Han Shua believed that once he entered the Fringe and arranged for the Han family to settle in the Pandemonium, they wouldn't pose much of a threat to him. The only thing that made Han Shua's heart tremble was the Overgod of Darkness. However, he couldn't understand why the Overgod of Darkness didn't attack him after he caused such a huge commotion in the Darkness Dominion. Judging from the strength the Overgod of Darkness had displayed in the city of gorging clouds, Han Shua didn't think that the Overgod of Darkness could easily escape. Why? I have killed 2 city lords, Hoffs and Wallace. Why didn't he attack me? Han Shua couldn't figure out the answer to this question even after he arrived at the Ronson Canyon. After arriving at the Ronson Canyon, Han Shua spread out his consciousness and soon found a god hunter hiding in the dark. Han Shua's figure blurred and appeared before the god hunter. Before the god hunter could resist, Han Shua grabbed the god hunter by the neck and asked, "Where is Scarlet? Who are you? Why are you looking for our Lord Chief?" The god hunter was shocked and he cried out in panic. Han Shua chuckled and released the god hunter's neck. He smilingly said, "I'm from the Han family. Scarlet saved a member of the Han family. I'm here to thank her and ask her some questions." The god hunter heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that Han Shua was from the Han family. However, he still put on a cautious face and asked, "Why are you looking for our chief?" Han Shua bunched his brows and asked, "Han Hao used to be in charge of this place, right?" The god hunter put on a respectful face when he heard Han Hao's name. He asked, "When Chief Han Hao was in the Ronson Canyon, all god hunters had to listen to him. Do you know Han Hao?" Han Shua nodded and smilingly said, "Take a good look at me. Don't you think I look like Han Hao?" After hearing Han Shua's words, The god hunter seemed to have noticed Han Shua's resemblance. He took a good look at Han Shua, and his expression suddenly changed. As though he recalled something, he immediately said, "All right, I will bring you to our chief." Han Shua followed the god hunter into the depths of the Ronson Canyon. Along the way, Han Shua discovered that many god hunters were hiding in the dark. It seemed that they were up to something big again. "Why are you hiding in the dark?" Han Shua asked, puzzled. "Recently, a lot more people have been traveling from the Death Dominion to the Destruction Dominion. Most of them are members of large family clans in the Destruction Dominion. The god hunters of Ronson Canyon are secretly planning to attack some of the smaller family clans. Aren't we just gathering information?" Han Shua did not try to conceal anything and frankly revealed what he was doing. After hearing those words, Han Shua suddenly realized why so many family clans had left the Death Dominion. Those from the Destruction Dominion were most likely heading to Witherbone City to demand justice from Hill. They must have returned because they knew that Witherbone City was finished. That was why they left the Death Dominion. Chapter 9-10. Following behind the god hunter, Han Shua came to a cold lake with a waterfall. Before the two could approach, a group of god hunters walked out from the dark and blocked their way. One of the god hunters, a man with a deep red nose, shouted, "Lamb, your chief is discussing business inside. What are you doing here instead of patrolling outside?" Although the red-nosed man was shouting at Lamb, who brought Han Shua over, his eyes were wandering around Han Shua's body. As god hunters of Ronson Canyon, they were very familiar with Scarlet's subordinates. Han Shua was a stranger to them, and it was a special time for them to be cautious. Lamb slightly bowed and humbled himself before the red-nosed man. He smilingly said, "Please inform my chief that someone wants to see her." The red-nosed man looked at Han Shua suspiciously and coldly said, "Lamb, did you not hear what I just said? Your chief is discussing business inside, and she's not the only one. You have to wait until they are done before you report to her. Don't tell me you don't understand the rules." Lamb was stunned. He looked at Han Shua helplessly and said, "Why don't we wait? It shouldn't take long." Han Shua bunched his brows. With one thought, a demon general soundlessly passed through the waterfall and entered the spacious cave behind it. Inside the cave behind the waterfall, Scarlet and a few god hunter chiefs were arguing about the timing of their attack. The parties were flushed with anger, and their voices were getting more and more heated. The demon general circled around the back of the cave and observed everything inside. He then said in an indifferent voice, "I'm going to look for Scarlet." But Lamb anxiously tried to stop Han Shua when he saw that Han Shua was about to barge into the cave. "My friend, are you deaf? I was talking to you. Do you want to die?" The red-nosed man's face was as cold as ice. He took a step forward and stood in front of Han Shua. His left hand casually stretched out and suddenly pressed on the man's shoulder. With a light press, a creak sound actually came from all the bones in the man's body. The man's blood suddenly rushed up to his head, and scarlet blood suddenly overflowed from his eyes and nostrils. Bang! Red Nose's huge head exploded, shooting onto the grayish-brown rocks, as if a bright painting had been drawn. "Enemies! Enemies!" The god hunters behind Red Nose immediately cried out as soon as they saw that their leader had been killed. "You? How could you?" Lamb turned pale with fright and panic. He didn't understand why Han Shua suddenly went on a killing spree. Han Shua grinned and turned into a faint shadow as he shuttled back and forth among the god hunters. It was as though he was taking a leisurely stroll on a boulder beneath a waterfall. With a wave of his hand, he slaughtered the god hunters. "Don't worry, you'll be fine." Han Shua said softly to Lamb as he sucked strands of his divine soul into the cauldron of myriad demon. "Murder. Enemies have entered. Enemies have entered. There are enemies in the cave. Everyone, come over." The voices of god hunters could be heard from all directions. The god hunters who were hiding around the waterfall were rushing towards the area. But as soon as they arrived, they were slaughtered by Han Shua with a smile on his face. Not a single one of them survived. Lamb's face was filled with fear. He kept a safe distance from Han Shua, fearing that Han Shuo would suddenly attack him. The god hunter leaders of Tanai and Ronson Gorge, who were quarreling in the cave, heard the commotion outside. They immediately stopped quarreling and landed outside the waterfall. By the time they arrived at the waterfall and stood before Han Shuo, the ground was already littered with corpses. Every single one of them had their bones shattered by the tremendous force. First, their bodies were utterly destroyed, then their divine souls. The only one left standing, apart from the murderer, Han Shuo, was Lam, who wore a terrified expression. "Who are you? What do you want?" A god hunter leader's expression changed, and he sternly rebuked. "I am the patriarch of the Han family. I have come here today to purge the Ronson Gorge and take your lives," said Han Shuo in a nonchalant manner. Why are you doing this? We have no grudges against you. Last time when the Han family passed through the Ronson Gorge, we did not attack the Han family. Why?" The god hunter leader was shocked. He had heard a little about the news from Witherbone City. When he heard Han Shuo's name, he immediately shuddered. "That's because you are afraid of Han Hao. Haha, if it weren't for Han Hao, perhaps the Han family would have been finished in the Ronson Gorge," explained Han Shuo casually. Before the god hunters could refute him, demon generals filled the sky and swarmed towards the god hunters like a dark cloud, drowning them in it. The main reason why Han Shuo attacked the god hunters was to provide enough soul energy for the cauldron of myriad demon. Other than that, he also needed the high god's divine souls to erase their memories and self-awareness so that the Han family members who cultivated in the same energy could fuse with them. The sky full of demon generals whizzed out and entangled the god hunter leaders. Not a single one of them could break free. There were some high-level spirit demons mixed among the demon generals. The god hunter leaders were no match for the demon generals at all. Soon enough, their flesh was devoured by the demon generals. The god hunters that were even further away weren't able to escape the calamity either. They were all killed by the demon generals that appeared and disappeared mysteriously. About 10 minutes later, all the god hunters in the vicinity of the cave had been devoured by the demon generals. Han Shuo continued to absorb the divine souls of the god hunter leaders into the cauldron of myriad demon. The memories and self-awareness of the god hunter leaders were erased and turned into the purest of souls. The only things left behind were their understandings of the energy they cultivated in. Other than Han Shuo, Lam and Scarlet were the only ones who were still standing. When Scarlet saw the sky full of demon generals swarming towards her, she suddenly fell into despair. She thought that she would be killed by Han Shuo. But when the demon generals arrived in front of her, they gently floated past her as if she was invisible. Not a single demon general attacked her. Scarlet was overjoyed. She immediately realized that she had escaped this calamity thanks to what she had done for the House of Han. A sense of respect rose in Scarlet's heart when she sensed the terrifying energy of the demon generals. It was at this moment that she realized why the little skull Han Hao possessed such terrifying and mysterious energy. With such a formidable leader of the Han family, it was only natural that he wouldn't be weak. After a short while, Han Shuo had taken care of everything around him. After all the demon generals returned to the cauldron of myriad demon, there were no longer any threats in the vicinity. It was at this moment that Han Shuo looked at Scarlet smilingly and said, "Scarlet, is it?" Scarlet was rather surprised to hear Han Shuo mention her name. She bowed respectfully in front of Han Shuo and said, "I'm Scarlet. May I know what brings you to the Ronson Canyon?" "Haha, my son has mentioned you to me. He told me that you saved the Han family. I happened to pass by the Ronson Canyon, so I wanted to visit you and purge the Ronson Canyon of those unclean things." Han Shuo replied politely to Scarlet. Scarlet, who had just witnessed with her own eyes how Han Shuo massacred the Tanai Godhunter chieftains in the Ronson Canyon, felt rather flattered when Han Shuo spoke to her so amiably. She respectfully asked, "How did you hear of my name? The son you mentioned, is he Han Hao? You know him, don't you?" asked Han Shuo smilingly as he looked into Scarlet's eyes. Upon hearing Han Hao's name, Scarlet's petite body slightly trembled. She nodded in a flustered manner and replied, I do. I didn't expect that you are his father." After taking a short pause, Scarlet mumbled to herself, I should have expected it. You two look so alike, and your auras are so similar. No wonder. Han Hao has left the God Hunter Alliance and will sooner or later become an enemy of the hegemons of the Abyss of Death. I heard that you were on good terms with Han Hao. You don't want to become an enemy of Han Hao, do you? Are you interested in developing your career in the Fringe? Han Hao is also in the Fringe, asked Han Shuo smilingly. He seemed to have guessed something from Scarlet's strange behavior. Scarlet was startled yet again. She stared at Han Shuo for a few deep glances before she cautiously asked, "Is this your idea? Or is it Han Hao's idea?" Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment before he put on a faint smile and replied, "You can say that it's my idea. If it weren't for your help, our Han family would have perished here. Han Hao and I are very grateful to you. If you stay in Ronson Canyon, you might become an enemy of Han Hao one day. Therefore, I hope that you can leave the God Hunter Alliance. Since Han Hao wants me to go to the Fringe, I will make some preparations and leave this place as soon as possible," said Scarlet without any hesitation after hearing Han Shuo's words. Han Shuo was amused. He did not expect that Han Hao would make Scarlet so loyal to him. Scarlet was willing to give up everything in the Ronson Canyon and go to the Fringe after learning that it was Han Hao's idea. It was truly a surprise to him. Today, all the chiefs of Ronson Canyon had perished. If Scarlet did not leave the canyon, she would be able to gather all the God Hunters under her control and become the true leader of Ronson Canyon. Han Shuo had a whole new level of respect for Scarlet for the sake of Han Hao. However, although Scarlet had a voluptuous body, the scars on her face were rather unflattering. Han Shuo had some ideas. "Scarlet, come here. I will remove the scars on your face," said Han Shuo after observing for a moment. Scarlet was pleasantly surprised to hear those words. She stared at Han Shuo and stammered, You can remove the scars on my face?" "Of course, it's very easy," assured Han Shuo confidently. Han Shuo promised confidently, as if helping her solve this problem would be a piece of cake, and there was no difficulty at all. Scarlet was overjoyed. She might not believe it if it were someone else, but as the owner of Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, Han Shuo's miraculous medical skills were well known throughout the continent. She immediately believed Han Shuo's words and obediently walked towards Han Shuo. Chapter 9:11. The hideous scars on Scarlet's face ruined her overall image and deterred most men from approaching her. But apart from that, Scarlet had a graceful body and fair skin. She was a beauty in every way. Han Shuo could not find any flaw in her other than the scars. He nodded inwardly and felt that Scarlet was a good match for Han Hao, especially since she was very affectionate to Han Hao and was even willing to give up the sole leadership of the Ronson Canyon for him. This made Han Shuo very satisfied. He would be happy to have such a daughter-in-law. Scarlet was very modest and shy in front of Han Shuo due to her affection for Han Hao. She walked up to Han Shuo and lowered her head. She was a little flustered. "Don't be nervous, it's easy to fix." Han Shuo comforted her with a smile. He waved his left hand, and a cloud of warm gray smoke enveloped Scarlet's cheeks. Then, with another thought, the energy in his palm softened the scars on Scarlet's face and slowly peeled them off. "It's a little hot, but it doesn't matter. It will only cause the scars to peel off. I think you can endure the pain," Han Shuo said in a relaxed manner as he moved the power of his palm around Scarlet's face. With Han Shuo's incomparably precise control of magical yuan, he was naturally able to easily change the texture of her skin and the activity of her cells on her cheeks. This kind of scar would be difficult for an ordinary person to treat, but he was able to do it calmly. It didn't take long for Han Shuo to withdraw his hand. He looked at the two faint red lines on Scarlet's face and smilingly said, "Look at yourself in the mirror." Scarlet suddenly opened her eyes and looked at Han Shuo. She awkwardly said, "I don't have a mirror." Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment before he came to a sudden realization. He thought that Scarlet must be afraid to look at the scars on her face and therefore did not bring a mirror with her. He smiled, took out a mirror from his space ring, handed it to Scarlet, and said, "Take a look. Remember to look at yourself in the mirror often." After taking a short pause, Han Shuo took out a bottle of medicine and handed it to Scarlet. He instructed, "This is the medicine I prepared for Carmelita in the City of Shadows. It's suitable for you as well. Apply it on the scars every morning and night. In less than a month, even the faint red lines will disappear." Scarlet took a deep breath when she received the medicine. She finally put the mirror in front of her face and cried out in surprise. She looked at Han Shuo with gratitude and said, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Han Shuo waved his hand and courteously said, "I should be the one thanking you. Without your persuasion, my Han family would have been annihilated. I should be the one thanking you." Scarlet put away the bottle of medicine with great care. She put on a bright smile and said to Han Shuo sincerely, "I will make arrangements for the Ronson Canyon. After that, I will head to the fringe." Han Shuo nodded and smilingly said, "The sooner the better. I believe that Han Hao will be shocked to see you." Haha. It was in every woman's nature to love beauty. Scarlet had always felt inferior when she faced Han Hao because of the scar on her face. Now that the scar on her face was gone, her beauty was no longer compromised. Scarlet had become much more confident than before. As though she recalled the scene when she met Han Hao, Scarlet put on a bashful smile. "By the way, what's with the scar on your face? Forgive me for being blunt, but it was obviously caused by a sharp weapon. Who did it?" Han Shuo couldn't help but ask when he saw that Scarlet was in a good mood. "I did it myself." Scarlet hesitated for a moment before giving a shocking answer to Han Shuo. Before Han Shuo could ask further, Scarlet explained, "Back then, my family was annihilated. All the males were killed or forced to serve as divine servants. The females were raped and sold as singers. In order to escape from this fate, I cut my face with a sharp weapon." Scarlet told Han Shuo about her bitter past. From her, Han Shuo learned about her tragic past. "Is the enemy still alive?" Han Shuo's face turned dark and he softly asked, "Haha, thank you for your kindness, but there is no need for you to do it. After I became a god hunter, I spared no effort to improve my strength. I have avenged my family many years ago," Han Shuo said. As soon as Scarlet heard Han Shuo's words, she knew that he wanted to avenge her. She felt warm in her heart. She felt that although Han Shuo and Han Hao were cold-blooded killers, they were just as forthright and loyal to their friends and benefactors. Han Shuo nodded and said, "All right, I'll take my leave first. After you settle the matter in the Ronson Canyon, go to the fringe. If anyone tries to harm you in the fringe, just tell them my name. I don't think they will be foolish enough to harm you." In the Ronson Grand Canyon, Scarlet's strength could be considered decent. But the fringe was filled with ferocious forces. Almost every leader of a small force was a high god. An early-stage high god like Scarlet was nothing to them. Besides, outsiders would be bullied and humiliated upon entering the land of chaos. They might not even be able to enter the Omphalos. "I'll be careful," replied Scarlet in a cheerful smile. She felt that she could hang out with Han Shuo. Without saying anything else, Han Shuo smiled and bade farewell to Scarlet before leaving. Han Shuo had always been a person who repaid kindness with kindness. Now that he had settled the grudge between Hafs, Wallace, and the others, and Scarlet, his benefactor, had been dealt with, it was time for him to return to the fringe. In a cold, barren, and gloomy graveyard, ghastly green phosphorescence flickered here and there. The ground was covered with white bones and mist. Suddenly, lightning bolts flashed in a graveyard buried deep underground. A majestic figure suddenly emerged from the grave and took a deep breath of fresh air. Suddenly, a sinister laughter sounded from an even larger grave. "Hee hee, Salus, you should have recovered by now, right?" Lightning crackled around his body and repelled the mist. Then, he stepped on an enormous skeleton and made a crisp cracking sound. Salus's eyes flashed with lightning as he looked at the grave from which the voice came. He said, "Thank you very much. Without the help of the God Hunter Alliance, I wouldn't have recovered so quickly." "You're welcome. But don't forget what you promised us." The person in the grave put on a cunning smile and said, "Tyre, Logue, and the others have occupied the fringe for far too long. It's time for them to move. We, the God Hunter Alliance, have been drooling over such a good place for a long time. Humph, there's no place for me in the fringe anyway. Since Tyre, Logue, and the others have agreed to let that youngster stay in the Omphalos, it means that they have acknowledged his position. To me, everyone in the fringe is my enemy. I can't return to the fringe anyway. What you do has nothing to do with me, said Salus angrily. He was very dissatisfied with Tyre and Logue's actions. Good, very good. Salus, I heard that your enemy has left the fringe and is now in the limelight in the darkness and death dominions. Are you interested in joining hands with us to prevent him from returning to the fringe? Suggested the person in the grave smilingly. Salus stared blankly for a moment before he smirked and said, That youngster comes and goes like a shadow. You can track him? 3 days ago, I received news that the god hunters in Ronson Canyon have been wiped out. That guy is returning to the fringe from the death dominion. Hee, this is the death dominion. Other than the overgod of death, I'm the most well-informed here. It won't be difficult for me to track him down, said the person in the grave confidently. Salus was obviously tempted. He hesitated for a moment and said in a rather embarrassed manner, I have fought that guy twice. He's a very treacherous and vicious person. He's even harder to deal with than old foxes like Tyre and Logue. Especially that youngsters' escaping skills are top-notch. If we can't capture him, I think we should just forget about it. That fella is a vengeful person and his strength is improving rapidly. He won't be easy to deal with. Salus, don't tell me that you're afraid. The person in the grave burst into laughter and said, You, Salus, have dominated the fringe for many years. Even the hegemons of our God Hunter Alliance admire you very much and dare not enter the fringe. That youngster was obviously just taking advantage of us. Why would you be afraid of him? Are you still the Salus we know? An eye for an eye has always been your way of doing things. Everyone thought that Han Shuo had taken advantage of the God Hunter Alliance, but only Salus knew that his defeat was no coincidence. He knew better than anyone else how terrifying Han Shuo was. No matter how the person in the grave tried to instigate him, Salus remained unmoved. He coldly said, Unless you are absolutely certain that nothing will go wrong, I will not fight him head-on. The person in the grave kept silent for a moment, as though he couldn't understand why Salus would be so cautious. But after a while, he seemed to have thought it through. He put on a mischievous smile and said, Me, the hegemons in charge of the destruction and darkness dominions, and you. The 4 of us will join forces. Are you up for it? Salus was startled. He looked at the grave in puzzlement and bunched his brows as he asked, What kind of grudge does he have against your God Hunter Alliance? How did he provoke the 3 of you to join forces? One of the leaders I value the most is called Han Hao. He betrayed me after I came to the fringe. Not only that, back in the Darkness Dominion, he led a group of people to annihilate one of our branches. Just a few days ago, he wiped out everyone in the Ronson Canyon. His existence is a serious threat to our God Hunter Alliance, especially since he is making rapid progress. We must get rid of him as soon as possible, said the person in the grave in a sinister voice. After taking a short pause, he continued, With the 4 of us joining forces, even Tyre will die without a doubt. Are you up for it? Salus hesitated for a moment. When he recalled how Han Shuo annihilated Empyrean Peak, he hardened his heart and said, Damn it, I'll do it. Chapter 9:12. The Misty Sea was the only way to leave the Death Dominion and head to the fringe. After crossing the Misty Sea and passing through 2 towering mountains, one would be out of the Death Dominion. The reason why the Misty Ocean had such a name was because it was covered in clouds and mist. The mist was like a white cloth that covered the entire surface of the ocean. People above the Misty Ocean couldn't even see the seawater clearly. No matter how strong the sunlight was, it couldn't penetrate the thick, cotton muslin-like fog. The Misty Sea was vast, and there were countless strange creatures living at the bottom of the sea. Some alien races lived at the bottom of the Misty Sea all year round and never interfered with the land dwellers of the Death Dominion. Once one entered the Misty Sea, one could easily lose one's way. Weaker gods would most likely end up as God Hunter's prey. They would be killed by the thick mist of the misty sea. One day, Han Shuo finally arrived at the entrance of the misty sea. Looking at the mist that covered the entire surface of the misty sea, Han Shuo noticed that the mist that lingered above the misty sea was much denser than the last time he was here. Not only that, he also noticed that the element of death and darkness in the misty sea seemed to be much denser than before. He also noticed that there weren't any god hunters wandering around the misty sea in search of prey. This was rather unexpected. Before entering the Death Dominion, Han Shuo noticed that there were many god hunters in the misty sea. Some of them even tried to provoke him but were killed by Han Shuo. Their corpses were thrown into the sea to feed the enormous creatures living at the bottom of the sea. Many god hunters would form groups and roam above the misty sea. Using the natural mist of the misty sea, they could come and go without a trace. Once they spotted a prey, they would pounce on it. But if they discovered that the prey was too strong, they could easily retreat based on their familiarity with the misty sea. It seemed to be a blessed land for god hunters. Standing at the entrance, Han Shuo's consciousness floated around the misty sea. He did not sense any strong life energy. Instead, he felt that it was strange and regretful. Along the way, Han Shuo had wiped out more than a dozen god hunter factions of various sizes. Based on the information provided by Scarlet, Han Shuo would purposely go to the areas where god hunters gathered and hunt them down using the powerful senses of his soul. From the Ronson Canyon until now, Han Shuo had killed more than 500 god hunters. Another 500 demon generals were added to the cauldron of myriad demon. Han Shuo didn't mind the oddities of the misty sea. Although he felt regretful, he still entered the misty sea unhurriedly. Since there were no god hunters in the misty sea, Han Shuo didn't plan to stay for too long. He picked up his pace and left this place as soon as possible. When he arrived at the center of the misty sea, his consciousness suddenly shuddered. A sense of crisis arose from the bottom of his heart. He sensed danger from the bottom of his heart. Han Shuo bunched his brows. Instead of rushing forward, he stood still and cleared his mind of all the random thoughts he had just had. Then, he focused his attention on the strange feeling that suddenly welled up in his heart. After attaining the Skybreak realm in demonic arts, the cultivation of Han Shuo's mind had entered an exceedingly profound realm. Whenever a crisis befell him, he would always be able to sense it ahead of time and take timely remedial measures. This sense of danger gushed out from the bottom of his heart and corresponded with some of the suspicions in his mind. He immediately realized that something must have happened in the misty sea. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many coincidences happening together. He released his divine sense and turned it into thousands of strands that slowly spread out with him as the center. Dozens of newly refined demon generals also flew out of his body and scattered around the misty ocean, searching for any possible accidents. "Who's there?" Han Shuo suddenly shouted coldly. After entering the misty sea, Han Shuo had absolute confidence in himself. Apart from overgods who truly possessed godhood, he really didn't care about most people. Furthermore, sovereigns were usually extremely arrogant people, so they definitely wouldn't do something like sneaky ambushes like this. His consciousness and demon generals spread to every corner of the misty sea, but they didn't find anything strange. However, the sense of danger in his heart didn't disappear. Instead, it grew stronger and stronger. This made Han Shuo realize that there must be enemies in the misty sea. With a thought, all his consciousness and demon generals returned to his body. Han Shuo snorted coldly and no longer cared about the enemies hiding in the dark. He flew out of the misty sea at an even faster speed. In his opinion, since the enemies were hiding in the misty sea, they were planning to use the special terrain of the misty sea to deal with him. Therefore, they definitely didn't want him to leave the misty sea. Now that he had seized the opportunity to fly away, the people hiding in the dark would definitely show themselves and stop them at all costs. Han Shuo's judgment was correct. As he expected, when he tried to leave the misty sea at an even faster speed, the death and darkness elements in the misty sea suddenly started to gather strangely. In an instant, the white fog in the misty sea turned black and filled the entire sea. The death chi raged on the surface of the sea, mixed with the cold sea breeze, and spread across the entire sea in a very short time. As soon as the misty sea changed, Han Shuo immediately sensed that something was amiss. In an instant, layers upon layers of boundaries appeared on the misty sea. The boundaries gradually shrank towards him from all directions. It was obvious that the final target of all the changes in the misty sea was him. After carefully sensing the speed at which the death and darkness elements were gathering in the misty sea, Han Shuo's expression changed abruptly. He was slightly surprised. With his keen senses, he could sense the strength of the enemies hiding in the dark from the speed at which the death and darkness elements were gathering. He was sure that there were at least 2 overgods of death and darkness lurking in the dark. Although they were overgods without quintessence, 2 overgods gathered in the misty sea was still very terrifying. Just as Han Shuo was about to say something, he suddenly discovered that the bottom of the sea was boiling. The invisible seawater was filled with the power of destruction. Under the effect of the strange laws, the seawater was as hard as iron and stone, and it was rising bit by bit. There was also the gods of destruction. Han Shuo was shocked. He didn't expect that there were 3 overgods hiding in the misty sea. This was completely out of Han Shuo's expectations. A bolt of lightning tore through the fog and descended upon the surface of the sea at the same time. In an instant, the lightning split apart, and the dense power of thunder and lightning interweaved together, enveloping the fog above the misty sea and forming a heavenly net. Han Shuo wasn't familiar with the masters of the death, destruction, and darkness energies. However, when the lightning suddenly descended on his head, Han Shuo immediately guessed who it was from the familiar lightning energy. He raised his head and snorted, "Salus, I didn't expect you to be the one who schemed against me. I'm just curious as to how you were able to recover so quickly and find such powerful helpers. Can you explain these 2 points to me?" Salus's majestic figure gradually appeared in the mist. He looked down at Han Shuo from above. Salus had a strange look on his face. He snorted, "You're wrong this time. It's not me who schemed against you. It's the other 3. I'm just passing by." A thought flashed across Han Shuo's mind. He suddenly laughed and said, "So that's how it is. It seems that my massacre of god hunters has finally met my master's counterattack. Haha, I just didn't expect that this counterattack would be so ferocious." Amidst the boundless darkness, the silhouette of a 3,000-meter-tall giant gradually appeared. A pair of green eyes that looked like crescent moons hung high in the darkness, coldly looking down at Han Shuo. The terrifying energy of destruction seemed to have stirred up the seawater, causing it to undulate. The boundless darkness grew denser and denser. Another enormous shadow gradually appeared. The shadow was shrouded in the most intense element of darkness, making it impossible to discern its true appearance. At the same time, a white bone throne appeared out of thin air. The thick aura of death on the throne was constantly pulling and changing. A faint shadow was shrouded in the aura of death. The shadow was wearing a pale mask, and his true appearance was also obscured. The 3 overgods of destruction, darkness, and death appeared one after another. However, they either used darkness or masks to conceal their true appearances. It seemed that as hegemons of the God Hunter Alliance, they were indeed very cautious. As soon as the 3 overgods appeared, Han Shuo turned his attention to the 3,000-meter-tall giant. He laughed and said, "So it's you. I've seen you before. You are indeed that hegemon who cultivates in the Edict of Destruction, the Destruction Dominion." Back in the Darkness Dominion, Han Shuo had discovered a nest of the God Hunter Alliance and led Erebus to encircle and annihilate them. Little did he expect to discover Erebus' enormous avatar in the underground palace. They had nearly died there. Even before that, back in the Cemetery of Death on Profound Continent, this enormous illusion had appeared in an attempt to make Han Shuo submit to it and serve it on Profound Continent. Little did he expect that after so many years, in the misty sea of the Death Dominion, Han Shuo would finally meet the Overgod of Destruction. With Han Shuo's current insight, he could tell at a glance that the 3,000-meter-tall giant was merely an illusion. However, as the Overgod of Destruction possessed terrifying strength, No one would be able to tell the difference even if the giant was just an illusion. When such an enormous figure was revealed, those with weak wills would immediately submit to its divine might. Even Han Shuo had been terrified when he saw the enormous illusion and the power that was as mighty as heaven's might with every movement. Indeed, we have met before. Who would have thought that an ant-like character back then would possess the strength to threaten our alliance so quickly? An aged voice sounded from the giant's mouth. He seemed to be deeply moved. Chapter 9:13. Back when he first arrived on Elysium, any one of these four experts could have killed him without a doubt. There was no way he could have survived. However, after so many years, Han Shuo was no longer the same as before. The fact that they needed all four of them to kill Han Shuo proved how important Han Shuo was to them. The hegemons of the death, darkness, and destruction dominions, in addition to Salus, had set up an inescapable net in the misty sea. Their goal was obvious. Brian, don't even think about walking out of here alive today. Salus glared at Han Shuo and said hatefully. Han Shuo sensed the auras of the four and knew that the battle was going to be very difficult. He had just escaped from the city of gorging clouds in the darkness dominion using blood disassembly and was not in peak condition. It would be very dangerous for him to face the four. Naturally, Han Shuo could use the blood disassembly again to escape from the misty sea. However, he had just used the blood disassembly not too long ago. It wouldn't be as easy to use as it was the first time. Han Shuo knew that if he were to use blood disassembly again, his demonic body would be seriously injured, and he would not be able to recover in a short period of time. Even if he could escape from the encirclement of the four, there were still Tyre, Logue, and the others in the fringe. It would be very dangerous for him if his strength was not in peak condition. Han Shuo's face turned gloomy as he sensed the overbearing auras of the four. He anxiously tried to think of a way to escape from this place. Don't even think about leaving this place alive. The four of us have been preparing for so long just to be caught. Since you are here today, don't even think about leaving here alive, said the 1,000-meter-tall giant in the void. His green, crescent moon-like eyes stared at Han Shuo. He constantly channeled the energy of destruction and formed an enormous magnetic field with the giant at the center. The magnetic field affected the seawater of the misty sea and prevented Han Shuo from diving into the sea to escape. Hee, what a pity for such a good seedling. The Lord God on the white bone throne smiled sinisterly and slowly approached Han Shuo. The white bones on the white bone throne he was sitting on shone with a milky white halo, and gray death aura gathered towards him from all directions. Another commander who was completely enveloped by the dark element didn't say a word. However, he cooperated with the others and enveloped Han Shuo with the darkness. The four of them slowly approached Han Shuo. The power of death, darkness, destruction, and lightning slowly condensed, filling the entire misty sea. After the four domains of divinity were released, all the other elemental energies in this area disappeared. The chaotic energy divided into four streams, rushing towards Han Shuo from the sky, the ground, the front, and the back. The four of them must have carefully studied how to deal with Han Shuo. They might have even teamed up before Han Shuo arrived. Therefore, the four streams of energy locked down all of Han Shuo's escape routes. He was trapped in a corner and slowly squeezed by the four streams of energy. Han Shuo's heart skipped a beat. He realized that he couldn't be so passive. If he allowed the four streams of energy to continue squeezing him, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Under the pressure of the four streams of energy, his body would explode. His consciousness might be able to escape in thousands of strands, but the demon infant and his main body wouldn't be able to escape. Han Shuo immediately understood that if he didn't put his life on the line today, he wouldn't be able to leave the misty sea alive. He cursed inwardly and no longer hesitated. The power of the tens of thousands of demon generals in the cauldron of myriad demon surged into his body. The already bottomless energy in his body suddenly became boundless, allowing him to fight to his heart's content. This time, Han Shuo didn't let the demon infant escape from his body. He used his consciousness and demon generals to transform into a demon. Unlike when he faced Yaris in the city of gorging clouds, he needed to leave the misty sea as soon as possible and bring his main body with him. Han Shuo had transformed into a demon in the city of gorging clouds. Because he only needed to face Yaris, who was an overgod, he had used the miraculous power of demonic transformation to draw the dark vortex down. Even though he had failed in the end, his strategy was no problem. However, things were different now. For overgod experts wouldn't give him any chance, especially when one of them was Salus, who cultivated in the power of lightning. Salus's power of lightning was a great threat to the demon infant. After transforming into a demon, Han Shuo could transform into a myriad of forms and wasn't afraid of most powers, but the power of lightning was an exception. The power of lightning had always been the bane of life forms such as souls. Han Shuo might not care about the power of lightning of an ordinary god, but Salus had the power of an overgod. Once he unleashed the power of lightning, Han Shuo's true demon would be immediately injured. Therefore, he didn't use the demon general's power to transform into a demon. Instead, he gathered the demon general's power within his body and used it to fight the enemy. Boundless energy surged from his body. Han Shuo was suddenly filled with heroic spirit. He raised his head to the sky and laughed wildly. 17 flying swords took advantage of the momentum and flew out. Each flying sword left behind a long sword light that resembled a waterfall. It was as though 17 meteors were dancing around him. The sinister, and evil sword light converged together in a bizarre manner as they danced in the air. In the blink of an eye, the 17 flying swords gathered together, forming a huge sword projection that was 5 meters wide and 100 meters long, purely condensed from sword projections. The Avicii god-slaying sword formation's powerful deity slash condensed in an instant and immediately slashed at Salus, who was looking down from the sky. Like a ray of light from outer space, the gigantic sword ray tore a hole in the lightning power that Salus was forcing its way over with ease, charging straight at Salus in a ferocious and awe-inspiring manner. Salus cursed inwardly. There are clearly 4 people here. Why the F***CK do you have to target me? He was already fearful of Han Shuo after his battle with Han Shuo in Pandemonium. The fact that he didn't immediately go after Han Shuo after recovering his strength showed that he didn't have the confidence to face Han Shuo. With this preconceived notion in mind, he naturally thought of retreating when he saw the gigantic sword light coming at him. Therefore, Salus retreated. He didn't dare to face the surging deity head-on. He could only temporarily retreat in hopes of evading it. As a result, one of the 4 streams of energy pressing down on Han Shuo immediately weakened. "What are you doing, Salus? Block it!" The figure on the bone throne shouted angrily when he saw Salus retreating. In his opinion, Han Shuo's strength wasn't enough to injure Salus in one blow. As long as Salus could hold on for a moment, the 3 of them would naturally be able to neutralize the deity-slash's energy. Once the 4 of them pushed their strength to a certain point, all the energy in Han Shuo's body would be forcibly restrained, and he wouldn't be able to escape. However, it was obvious that Salus didn't listen to him. He let out a cold shout and continued to dodge the deity slash. As soon as Salus retreated, Han Shuo immediately launched another attack. The demonic blades burst forth from the gap created by Salus' retreat and soared towards the sky. Not good. The mountain-like giant that appeared in the dark suddenly let out a thunderous roar. The orbs of destruction rained down on Han Shuo like a torrential downpour. They were terrifyingly dense and didn't give Han Shuo a chance to dodge them. Han Shuo's avatar of destruction had also cultivated the orbs of destruction. He knew that the orbs of destruction were formed by the condensation of a large amount of destruction god power. A small orb of destruction usually contained a terrifying amount of power. When he saw the orbs of destruction raining down on him, his expression changed. Before the orbs of destruction could get close, Han Shuo summoned the orbs of destruction that he had refined himself. It swiftly collided with the orbs of destruction that were raining down on him. A wisp of his consciousness ignited the blood essence within the orbs of destruction, and the orbs of destruction suddenly exploded. The explosion of the Orb of Annihilation affected the densely packed Orbs of Annihilation. In an instant, the sky above Han Shua's head was filled with terrifying, earth-shattering noises. The deafening noises were so loud that they could tear one's eardrums apart. Han Shua had long since refined the Orbs of Destruction. He had added a strand of destruction divine energy into the Orbs of Destruction so that they could be detonated together with his Orbs of Destruction to maximize the power of the explosion. Unexpectedly, Han Shua didn't use the same method on anyone else. He tried it on this hegemon of destruction first. The explosion sounded from above Han Shua's head. Then, as though triggered by the lightning energy deployed by Salus, all the lightning energy in the sky exploded. The deafening roars of thunder seemed to have descended from the 9 heavens, filling the entire misty sea with endless explosions. The explosions lasted for a very long time. When they finally stopped, the misty sea, which was shrouded in mist all year round, was suddenly illuminated by the blinding sunlight. It was as though the sky had been pierced through. Salus' boundary has been broken. Daka, what the hell are you doing? The figure on the bone throne roared furiously. How am I supposed to know what's going on? The giant grunted, clearly very depressed. Daka, so your name is Daka. It was at this moment that Han Shua suddenly laughed heartily. He looked at the white-haired old man that was revealed after the dazzling sunlight faded away and the gigantic illusion disappeared. Time had left deep scars on his face. His wrinkles were deep and his hair was white like frost. Only his eyes shone brightly and were as sharp as blades. After laughing, under the blinding sunlight, Han Shua's body blurred. A dozen or so Han Shua split off and fled in different directions. With Salus and Daka's defenses torn apart, the energy restraining Han Shua was no longer able to restrain him. The boundary above Han Shua's head also exploded violently. Han Shua broke free and fled without hesitation. In a flurry, they realized that the dozen or so Han Shuas were all real and not illusions. They had no choice but to split up and chase after him. When they caught up with and killed the Han Shua transformed from demon generals, they suddenly discovered that a faint silhouette had long left the misty sea that had regained its brightness. After a few swaying movements, the silhouette's aura had vanished into thin air under the detection of their divine souls. Chapter 9:14. Salus and the 3 overgods regrouped at the center of the misty sea, their faces dark. The 4 of them had worked together for several days to set up a trap in the misty sea. In order to take down Han Shua, they had even practiced their joint attack techniques. After spending so much effort to take down Han Shua, they managed to surround Han Shua. Yet, at the most critical moment, Han Shua still managed to escape. If word of this got out, not only would the 4 of them lose face, even the reputation of the God Hunter Alliance would be tarnished. After evading Han Shua's deicide slash, Salus didn't expend any energy to defend against it. When the lightning above his head tore apart the boundary above the misty sea, the 17 flying swords returned to Han Shua's body and disappeared without a trace. Salus, it's all your fault. If you hadn't retreated first, he wouldn't have been able to escape. The 4 of them regrouped. The masked man on the white bone throne coldly snorted and angrily said, "This brat is indeed as cunning as a ghost. Today, the 4 of us joined hands and still couldn't stop him. He'll be even more difficult to deal with in the future." Salus was also furious and didn't give the masked man a friendly look. He snorted and said, "I was the one he attacked. If I had taken that attack head-on, I wouldn't be able to recover within 100 years. None of you know how terrifying that brat is without facing him head-on." The hegemon of destruction named Daka looked at Salus and the other 2 before nodding and saying, "Dagmar, Acer, that brat isn't easy to deal with. Now isn't the time to blame anyone. We need to find a way to get rid of him as soon as possible." After hearing Daka's words, Dagmar, who cultivated in the Edict of Death, seemed to realize that they still needed Salus' help to understand the situation in the fringe. So, he stopped berating Salus. After thinking for a moment, he furrowed his brows and said, before he left, that brat suddenly transformed into dozens of living beings. They all had the aura of a god. Otherwise, we wouldn't have fallen for it. How did he do it? Daka and Acer, who cultivated in the Edict of Darkness, looked at Salus. Of the four, only Salus was most familiar with Han Shuwa, so it was only natural that they would look at Salus. He has a strange power that seems to be able to control souls. I don't know how he does it, but I'm sure that the souls he controls can transform into his appearance. Salus pondered deeply for a moment before he continued. Compared to the last time, this guy has become much stronger. I still don't know what energy he cultivates. If we don't get rid of him in a short period of time, the day will come when all the hegemons of your God Hunter Alliance arrive, and they won't be able to capture him. Salus, given his personality, he won't let you get away with it. Do you have any good ideas? Asked Daka solemnly. He felt that Han Shuwa had become the biggest threat to the God Hunter Alliance. He also felt that Salus wasn't exaggerating. He can hide, but he has people he cares about. Those people are in the Pandemonium. As long as we surround that place, he will have no choice but to fight us with all his might. Salus suddenly said after a moment of silence. That's right. Good. As long as he has people he cares about, it means that he has a weakness. Dagmar smirked and continued. We are already preparing to move into the fringe anyway. This won't affect our operation. Salus, you have to remember what you promised us, okay? There's no place for me in the fringe anymore. If it's destroyed, so be it. Salus nodded, agreeing with Dagmar's words. As one of the 5 sovereigns of the fringe, he knew every region and every power in the fringe like the back of his hand. With his help, the God Hunter Alliance would be able to invade the fringe with ease. All right then, let's contact the other hegemons and discuss how we should work together to conquer the fringe, said Acer, who had been silent all this while. The 4 of them didn't say anything else. They looked at the misty sea that was illuminated by the sunlight and discussed their plan in a low voice before leaving the misty sea. After escaping from the misty sea, Han Shuwa heaved a sigh of relief. That was close. The 4 overgods had joined hands to lay out an inescapable net in the misty sea. As long as Salus did not evade an all-out attack from the overgods, it would be absolutely impossible for him to escape from their encirclement. In fact, he might not even be able to use the Crimson Disassembly while surrounded by the 4 overgods. Among the 4, Han Shuwa could sense that Salus was the weakest. The other 3 hegemons of the God Hunter Alliance were each more terrifying than the last, especially Daka, who cultivated in the Edict of Destruction. His true strength might not be any weaker than Tyre's in the fringe. If Han Shuwa hadn't used the ferocious might he displayed against Salus in the fringe to force Salus to retreat, used the Orb of Annihilation to detonate Daka's Orb of Destruction, and used a demon general made from the divine soul of a greater god to escape, he might have died in the misty sea. The God Hunter Alliance is indeed not to be underestimated. Since Salus is on the same side as the God Hunter Alliance, he must be plotting against the fringe. It seems that the fringe won't have many days of peace, muttered Han Shuwa. He planned to return to the fringe as soon as possible to make preparations. Huh. Han Shuwa softly cried out. He suddenly sensed a strong and familiar life fluctuation from afar. He had already left the Death Dominion and was heading to the Space Dominion through a remote path. He was currently in the vast mountain range between the Death Dominion and the Space Dominion. As soon as he sensed the familiar life signature, Han Shuwa calmed himself down and sensed it. His face lit up with joy. Just like how the 6-horned tribal king of the soul race on Profound Continent could remember Han Shuwa's soul undulations, Han Shuwa could now remember any soul undulations he encountered. Within a certain range, he could sense those soul undulations that were familiar to him. This was one of the most profound applications of the consciousness. He could sense that the familiar soul signature belonged to Dana, whom he had not heard from for a long time. Delighted, Han Shuwa immediately flew in the direction of Dana, ignoring the presence of other life signatures around Dana. Unlike Han Shuwa, Dana was preparing to enter the Death Dominion from the Space Dominion. She happened to be heading in Han Shuwa's direction as well. Therefore, the two soon met. Ahem. Han Shuwa suddenly stopped in front of Dana. He looked at Field, Dolores, and the others from the House of Lavers with a rather awkward face. Ever since Han Shuo entered the City of Shadows, the House of Lavers had been plagued by bad luck. He had killed Avery, and the House of Lavers was driven out of the City of Shadows. When they finally arrived at the City of Gorging Clouds, they were hunted down by Larixin because of Han Shuo. Han Shuo had to admit that Han Shuo was the bane of the House of Lavers. The people of Ferd probably didn't have it easy. Donna wasn't the only one. The remaining members of the family all looked tired and weak. Only their eyes shone with the light of ambition. No one knew what was supporting them. Han Shuo's sudden appearance caused the faces of those from the House of Lavers to turn ashen. Field and the others from the House of Lavers immediately retreated and looked at Han Shuo in terror. Field put on a bitter smile and said, "So it's you. I didn't expect you to find this place. It seems that our House of Lavers is going to be annihilated today." Unlike Hoffs and Wallace, the members of the House of Lavers who had been hiding in Phantasmal City in the Space Dominion for years had more or less heard about Han Shuo's presence in the Fringe. In addition to the information he had recently received from the Darkness Dominion, Field knew very well just how terrifying Han Shuo had become. Field, who had planned to return to Hushvale City in high spirits to take over as the City Lord of Hushvale City in the Darkness Dominion, was brimming with hope. He thought that his House of Lavers could finally rise again. Little did he expect that he would run into Han Shuo on his way to the Fringe. The hope in his heart instantly turned into despair. Except for Donna, all the members of the House of Lavers looked at Han Shuo in terror. Some of the weaker ones even cried out, "Please, spare us. Our House of Lavers has already been reduced to such a state. Please spare us." "Don't beg him. At worst, we'll just die," shouted Field. He glared at Han Shuo and said, "That's right. It was Larixin and I who made the first move at Soaring Cloud Mountain Range. I know you've discovered it long ago. Even if you annihilate our House of Lavers today, I won't even frown." Han Shuo let out a soft sigh and said, "Let bygones be bygones. I won't do anything to your House of Lavers anymore. I'm not here for you today. I just happened to pass by this place and sensed Donna's aura. I came to see her. You don't have to be so nervous." Field put on a puzzled face when he heard those words. He looked at Han Shuo puzzledly and asked, "With your current strength, it's as easy as flipping your hand to annihilate us. What are you trying to do?" "All along, I've been passively retaliating against your House of Lavers. I've never taken the initiative to provoke you. If Avery hadn't tried to kill me time and time again, I wouldn't have made a move against him. Besides, I've never asked the House of Saint to do anything to you. It's all because Avery attacked Carmelita. I hope you all remember that I have a clear conscience when it comes to how I treated your House of Lavers." For various reasons, Han Shuo had never had the chance to have a proper conversation with Field. It was as though everyone felt that he, Han Shuo, had done wrong to the House of Lavers. But as long as he understood that they had brought all of this upon themselves, he finally had the chance to vent his frustrations. "Brian, let's talk in private," suggested Donna with a soft sigh. Han Shuo took a deep breath and nodded. He cast a glance at Field, who was wearing a complicated expression, and walked side by side with Donna towards a dense forest in the mountain range. Chapter 9:15. As soon as Han Shuo and Donna left, Dolores of the Lavers family immediately said to Field, "Patriarch, the Overgod left a divine mark in your divine soul. Through this divine mark, you can communicate with the Overgod of Darkness. If Patriarch can communicate with the Overgod of Darkness immediately and inform him that Brian is here, the Overgod might be able to descend to this place and kill Brian on the spot." Dolores was speaking very cautiously as though he was afraid that Han Shuo, who had disappeared into the forest with Donna, would hear him. The eyes of those members of the Lavers family who were pitifully begging Han Shuo to spare their lives lit up when they heard Dolores' suggestion. They all tried to persuade Field, hoping that he could immediately communicate with the Overgod of Darkness and have the Overgod descend to this place to kill Han Shuo. Field shot a sideways glance at Dolores, who came up with the suggestion, and said snappily, "Do you really want the Lavers family to go extinct just like that?" Dolores was startled. He hurriedly kowtowed before Field and anxiously expressed his opinion. "Patriarch, Why do you say that? Field put on a gloomy face and looked hatefully at his clansmen, who were just as baffled. He groaned and said, "If the Overgod wanted Brian dead, do you think he would be able to come out of the darkness dominion alive?" Dolores grew even more terrified. He softly cried out, You mean to say that the Overgod deliberately spared him? How is that possible? Hoffs and Wallace are the lords of cities in the darkness dominion. How could the Overgod spare Brian after he killed two important characters of the darkness dominion? How is that possible? Field curled his lips disdainfully and said in a deep voice, "You have never sensed the existence of the Overgod. You will never understand the divine abilities of the Overgod. Although I don't know why the Overgod did not kill him, I am certain that if the Overgod wills it, he will not leave the darkness dominion alive." This. Dolores was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. Field coldly snorted and said, "You'd better get rid of that thought as soon as possible. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to this person that we were able to return to the darkness dominion and establish our base in Hushvale City. Based on his qualifications and family strength, it's impossible for me to become the city lord of Hushvale City. I'm still wondering if he's the reason why the Overgod chose me." Dolores' face was filled with horror and disbelief. He kept muttering in a low voice, "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. An Overgod is omnipotent in the darkness dominion. He can do whatever he wants on Elysium. Why would he care about such a nobody?" "Who knows?" Field wore an odd expression. He shook his head with a bitter smile and let out a soft sigh. "If I knew he was this powerful, I would have welcomed him personally the first day he stepped into the Laver's residence." Sigh. "I have to say that we are not as good as Donna when it comes to judging people. If I had listened to Donna, not only would our House of Lavers not have declined, we would have soared to great heights." Patriarch, do you mean that you don't intend to avenge Uncle Avery?" Dolores was stunned. He stammered for a moment before he asked apprehensively, "Avenge?" Field put on a bitter smile. He glanced at the forest and sighed. "How are we going to avenge him? Yaris was the lord of a city and had Overgod strength. Not to mention Darkwada, the Darkstone brothers, Hoffs, Wallace, and Larrickson. But in the end, Yaris, Wallace, and Larrickson were all dead while Yaris was still free and unfettered. How are we going to avenge him? Who in our House of Lavers is capable of taking revenge?" But Dolores wanted to say something, but he couldn't find any words to persuade Field, perhaps because he had thought of the terrifying reality. Field waved his hand and impatiently said, "You better give up on this idea as soon as possible. Behave yourselves in Hushvale City and don't even think about attacking Brian. You will only bring disaster to the House of Lavers. Remember this." Dolores and the other members of the Lavers family found it hard to understand Field's words. However, under the deterrence of their patriarch, they had no choice but to comply. Deep in the forest, the vegetation was lush and verdant. Some of the bright-colored flower buds were releasing temporary beauty and a faint fragrance. Donna was standing in the middle of a patch of wildflowers. She was slender and elegant. She was as gorgeous and outstanding as a fresh flower. Donna was a beautiful woman with outstanding temperament and radiance. After the tragedy that befell her family clan, she had gained a slightly haggard appearance. But not only did this not diminish Donna's beauty, it made her look even more pitiful. Her lavender gown wrapped around her voluptuous body. Her beautiful legs were long and slender, her pink buttocks were perky, and her breasts were plump. There was a hint of worry on her rosy cheeks, which made people want to hold her in their arms and carefully protect and love her. Looking at Donna in front of him, Han Shuo felt as if he had 1,000 words to say, but when the words reached the tip of his tongue, all that came out was a long sigh. "AI. Big sister Donna, long time no see." Donna raised her slender eyebrows and stared at Han Shuo with her bright eyes. She was dazed for a moment. After so many years, the young man who had concealed his abilities and came to Elysium empty-handed had become an outstanding figure whose name shook the heavens. He had become the king of the most terrifying and chaotic land on Elysium. He had battled the strongest city lord of the Darkness Dominion, killed several other city lords despite being heavily surrounded, and was able to retreat with ease. Rays of dazzling light surrounded his body. In just a short few decades, he had become the most dazzling figure on Elysium. His valiant strength had made many city lords of the Divine Dominion bow their heads in submission. Even Donna, who had long believed that he was an extraordinary person, did not expect that he would one day reach such heights. Brian, I really did not expect that you would achieve what you have today. Donna's smile was somewhat forced. It was obviously not as radiant as it used to be. Sister Donna, where are you going? Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. He felt that he should talk about something more substantive. We are returning to the Darkness Dominion. My father has been granted a divine seal by the Darkness Overgod. He has been ordered to return to Hushvale City and take over the position of City Lord. Donna frankly told Han Shuo her objective. Haha, so that's how it is. It seems that Hoff's death has other benefits. Who will take over the position of City Lord of the City of Shadows? Han Shuo laughed involuntarily. He did not expect that the Darkness Overgod would bestow the position to Felder. This was rather out of his expectations. It's Andre of the House of Saint. With him as the new City Lord, the City of Shadows will be as stable as Mount Tai. No family clans will object. Donna continued. Very good. Andre is now the City Lord of the City of Shadows. I believe that under Andre's management, the City of Shadows will flourish to a whole new level. Wallace is indeed capable, but unfortunately, he is too narrow-minded. Many family clans that had the potential to flourish were forced out of the City of Shadows. As long as he lives in the City of Shadows, the City of Shadows will never flourish. Han Shuo put on a smile and said the truth. Donna slightly bunched her brows. She stared at Han Shuo with her beautiful eyes and did not say a word. Her stares made Han Shuo feel uncomfortable all over. He didn't know why, but Han Shuo actually felt a rare bit of panic under Donna's gaze. This kind of panic had nothing to do with strength or weakness. It was purely a bit of guilt and a trace of hope. He was worried about what he would lose, what he would have to bear. Donna was silent for a while and took a deep breath. Her ample breasts swelled even more as she inhaled, and her clothes were on the verge of bursting out. She seemed to have finally made up her mind. Her eyes sparkled as she stared unblinkingly into Han Shuo's eyes. She asked softly, "Why did you kill that person?" Donna did not say a name, but Han Shuo immediately knew who Donna was talking about. Han Shuo panicked. He felt that his heart was beating uncontrollably. He hastily replied, "That youngster has never done anything decent in the City of Gorging Clouds. He doesn't deserve you. We are friends. I can't just watch you jump into a sea of fire." As he spoke, Han Shuo seemed to have found an excuse to convince himself. His face was full of righteousness. Donna stared at him without saying a word. She just looked at him silently. Under such a gaze, Han Shuo suddenly felt guilty. He did not dare to look into Donna's eyes. He pretended to lower his head carelessly to avoid looking into Donna's eyes. After a long while, the corners of Donna's mouth curled into a spurious smile as she muttered to herself in a self-mocking manner, "What a righteous reason. Brian, when you killed him, didn't you have any selfish thoughts in your heart?" Han Shuo's mind trembled as he suddenly recalled the exhilarating feeling he'd felt after he'd made his move. His entire body had relaxed after killing that person, and he'd felt that he'd managed to keep what belonged to him and hadn't lost it to someone else. In his subconscious mind, his thoughts were completely selfish. "What? Did I see through your thoughts?" Donna sneered and said in a low voice, "Brian, you are the most selfish person in the world. Everything you did was just a pretense and an excuse to help me. I don't believe that you didn't think about the disaster you would bring to my Laver's family after killing him, but you still killed him. You didn't do it for me, you did it for yourself." For myself? Han Shuo mumbled to himself. He then asked himself, "For myself what? What can I get out of it?" "In your heart, I belong to you alone. Even if you don't care about me, you won't allow anyone else to touch me." Donna suddenly took a step forward and grabbed Han Shuo by the neck. She forced Han Shuo to look into her eyes. Donna put on a fierce face and said hatefully, "Tell me, is that what you are thinking?" I don't know." This was the first time Han Shuo was treated like this by a woman. He felt that he was at a complete disadvantage. He looked rather bewildered. Suddenly, Han Shuo felt that his demonic infant was beating wildly. His Skybreak realm mind had become unstable. Even the demonic yuan in his body had become somewhat chaotic. Han Shuo suddenly realized that the matter with Donna had become a demon in his heart. After a series of thoughts flashed through his mind, Han Shuo's face turned fierce. He pulled Donna into his arms and said fiercely, "That's right, that's what I'm thinking. I don't want anyone to touch the woman I fancy. That's the kind of person I am. What do you want?" In an instant, Donna's eyes were brimming with tears. She used all her strength to hug Han Shuo tightly. She buried her face in Han Shuo's broad chest and cried bitterly. She had finally heard those words. Chapter 9:16. Han Shuo had always refused to admit that he coveted Donna. He tried his best to avoid entangling himself too deeply with her. However, in the depths of his heart, just as Donna had said, he had long regarded Donna as his exclusive property. He would not allow anyone to encroach on her. Today, Donna's insistent questions had forced him to confess. Even his state of mind was in a state of chaos. Han Shuo finally understood how deep his yearning was. Such was the nature of relationships. Sometimes, when a woman was cursing and quarreling, it would seem difficult to put an end to it. But more often than not, a single hug would be enough to resolve everything. All their anger and resentment would dissipate in an instant. The relationship between a man and a woman could sometimes be incomparably profound, but it could also be extremely simple. Donna's many years of resentment and anger toward Han Shuo collapsed with a single sentence from Han Shuo. There was no longer any hatred left in her heart. She had even completely forgotten about her family feud. In the face of great things, some men could abandon everything for the sake of benefits. Their goals were clear. But women were different. They could abandon everything for a man. Whether it was family feud, family, or friends, they would all appear very fragile in front of their loved ones. At this moment, Donna's eyes were brimming with tears. She hugged Han Shuo tightly as though she wanted to squeeze Han Shuo into her body. Han Shuo was deeply moved. He did not say a word and allowed Donna to weep on his chest. He only gently caressed her soft long hair, using such gentleness to express his love and tenderness. After years of resentment, Donna's heart gradually calmed down along with her tears. Leaning on Han Shuo's broad chest, she felt incomparably tranquil. She had never had a single day of peace while she was in hiding with the Lavers family. But now, her heart was at peace because she had someone to rely on. She really wanted to rely on him for the rest of her life. Donna's heart was overflowing with sweetness, and a silly smile hung on her face. After a long while, Donna felt that she had vented enough. She awkwardly moved away from Han Shuo's chest and looked at the nervous Han Shuo with teary eyes. She suddenly felt that this silly Han Shuo was so adorable. Although he had dominated Elysium, he didn't have the slightest bit of aggressiveness or fierceness. Instead, he appeared cautious and at a loss. Poochie, Donna, whose cheeks were still wet with tears, couldn't help but chuckle. She reached out and pinched Han Shuo's face. She snorted and said, "Look at you. It's as if I forced you. You're such a jerk." Han Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought, "You're the one who forced me." But now that the knot in his heart has been untied, Han Shuo felt rather awkward when he looked at Donna again. He still didn't dare to look into Donna's bright eyes. He quietly lowered his head again. As soon as he lowered his head, his eyes suddenly lit up. His gaze fell on Donna's towering and full breasts, and he was instantly fixated on them. Due to her tears, Donna's chest was completely damp. Her clothes were thin to begin with, and with her tears wetting her chest, the thin clothes clung tightly to her voluptuous breasts. She looked as though she was not wearing any clothes, revealing many of her wonderful breasts. Her alluring curves were so beautiful, and the curves were so full and alluring that they could steal a man's heart. Donna's figure was graceful to begin with. Her breasts were even more firm and full. Now that they were wet from her tears, it immediately caused one's imagination to run wild. It was unknown if Donna had noticed Han Shua's peeping. She let out a soft groan and pretended to stretch her body. She stretched her arms and slightly straightened her waist, causing her ample breasts to stand out even more. The peak of her breasts even lightly touched Han Shua's chest. Han Shua's eyes suddenly widened. A ball of evil fire ignited in his heart. Giggling, Donna immediately stood up straight and turned around. She proudly said, "Brian, I'm not playing with you anymore. I still have to go to Hushvale City in the Darkness Dominion. Once our House of Lavers has established a foothold there, I will come to the Fringe to look for you." Donna was very proud of herself. Women were the most sensitive in this aspect. It was said that no matter how a man tried to sneak a peek at a beauty's sensitive spot, they would always be able to detect it with their amazing sixth sense. It was obvious that Donna had seen Han Shua's fiery gaze. She was very satisfied that she could make Han Shua's blood boil. She even played a little prank on Han Shua. Upon hearing that Donna was leaving, Han Shua immediately dispelled the wild thoughts in his mind. He hastily reached out and grabbed Donna. He creased his brows and asked, "You want to go to Hushvale City?" "Yes, I am a member of the House of Lavers. Now that the Overgod of Darkness has allowed my father to take over Hushvale City, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our House of Lavers. We need to make use of this opportunity to bring our House of Lavers back to prominence. Sigh, but my family is already very weak and we don't have enough manpower. I cannot leave my father at this time," Donna sighed and explained to Han Shua helplessly. Then what about us?" Han Shua was stunned and asked tentatively. Donna put her hand on Han Shua's cheek and put on a sweet smile. She said gently, "I will look for you, but not now. Don't worry, you have ruined my life. I will never let you off." Han Shua heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Then I am truly relieved. All right, go do what you need to do. I know you are in the Fringe. Once our House of Lavers can establish itself in Hushvale City, I will come and look for you." Donna smiled. Then, as though she recalled something, she giggled and said, "But when the time comes, you have to appease those women of yours. I'm afraid they might come after me. All right then, promise me. I will wait for you to come and look for me." Han Shua couldn't help but laugh. He nodded and no longer said anything to Donna. He took a step forward and pulled Donna into his arms. He tyrannically kissed Donna's rosy lips and left while laughing heartily. Donna's cheeks blushed and she stomped her foot. Then, she giggled and mumbled to herself, "This fella isn't as timid as I thought. She blinked her watery eyes and licked her rosy lips as though she was trying to engrave the traces of Han Shua in her heart. Just as the members of the Lavers family were getting impatient from waiting, Donna finally walked out from the depths of the forest. Before entering the forest, Donna had a gloomy expression on her face. Her eyes were brimming with resentment and hatred. Field was worried that Donna would disregard everything and fight Han Shua to the death. He was worried that something might happen to her. However, when Donna came out from the forest, her eyes were sparkling and her face radiated radiance. She was brimming with vitality and not the slightest trace of gloominess could be seen on her face. She was like a completely different person. The members of the Lavers family gaped in astonishment. They could not understand what had happened to Donna in just a few minutes. How did the lifeless Donna suddenly come back to life? This was beyond their expectations. They were at a loss as to what to do. Field gazed deeply at Donna as though he had guessed something. He creased his brows and asked, "Where is he?" "He's gone. He's returning to the Fringe." Donna tried her best to hide the joy on her face, but her reply was still as brisk as ever. Anyone could tell from her reply that she was different from usual. It wasn't that Donna wasn't mature enough, or that she wasn't adept at concealing her emotions. It was just that the great joy had diluted the great sorrow and transformed her body and mind. Her complexion had betrayed her. "Oh," Field nodded. He swept his gaze across the members of the Lavers family and coldly shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and move." The group of people led by Dolores hastily nodded in acknowledgement. They secretly sized up Donna while cursing in their minds. Field and Donna were at the forefront. After deliberately putting some distance between them and the people at the back, Field stealthily approached Donna and whispered, "Nana, I don't care about the matter between you and him, but I want you to remember to think for the sake of our family. Don't bring unnecessary trouble to our family." Donna stared blankly for a moment. She looked to her left and right and saw that the members of her family were being dragged along. Puzzled, she asked, "Father, you aren't going to stop him?" Field let out a soft sigh and shook his head. He said in a self-deprecating manner, "Can I?" "Father, actually, Donna hastily explained. She wanted to say that she would also pay attention to the difficulties of her family. After all, she had some enmity with the Lavers family. Field waved his hand and stopped Donna from explaining. He said, "You don't need to say anything. It is I who has wronged you. If I had listened to you and met with him on the first day he arrived at the Lavers' residence, perhaps none of this would have happened. Sigh, it is I, your father, who stubbornly acted on my own accord. I didn't give him any respect at all. Step by step, I pushed the Lavers family into the abyss. In the end, I had no choice but to compromise and nearly sacrifice your happiness to that good-for-nothing Larrickson. Sigh, of course I know that youngster isn't a good person. I brought this upon myself." After hearing Field's words, Donna understood his helplessness. She thought for a moment and suggested, "Why don't you expel me from the family? That way, I won't bring any trouble to the Lavers family." Field shook his head resolutely and said, "You didn't do anything wrong. I am the one at fault. Why should I let you go? All right, don't think too much about it. Although I don't know the reason, I can tell that the Overgod of Darkness and the Overgod of Death don't want him to die. There shouldn't be too much of a problem between you and him." "You mean you agree for me to be with him?" Donna was overjoyed. Her voice was trembling slightly. Nodding his head, Field sighed. "I've already borne too much for my family. I can be considered a competent leader, but I'm not a good father. Today, I will be a good father for once. I will temporarily cast aside the interests of the family." "Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father." Donna didn't know what to say. She originally thought that after Han Shuo killed Avery, the enmity between him and the family would be irreconcilable. She didn't expect that Field would not care about it. Not only did he not try to stop her, but he was also so considerate of her. Donna understood that with Field's words, she would no longer have a knot in her heart. Chapter 9:17. Ethereal City in the Space Dominion. Ever since Baum's death and McKinley took over as the city lord of Ethereal City, not only did the city's trade and combat strength not decline, but they had also grown even more prosperous than when Baum was alive. After McKinley took over Ethereal City, he reduced taxes on all kinds of transactions in the city. As long as one wasn't an evil person, one was welcome to enter Ethereal City. Furthermore, he still maintained the liberal environment of Ethereal City and did not interfere with the residents' personal affairs. McKinley's abilities were far more outstanding than Baum's. Not only was he adept at management, but he also knew how to win people's hearts. Under his leadership, all the major family clans and business owners in the city would submit to him. Those divine guards who had been following Baum submitted to McKinley without hesitation and managed Ethereal City for him. In Ethereal City, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy and the Goldstone Energy Gem Shop received a lot of attention from McKinley. With the help of the City Lord, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy and the Goldstone Energy Gem Shop had become the leaders of the two major industries in Ethereal City. It had been some time since Phoebe, Emily, and the members of the Han family had arrived in Ethereal City. They had received a grand welcome from McKinley and felt as though they were at home. Unlike the City of Shadows, Ethereal City was not only very suitable for living, but also more prosperous than the City of Shadows due to the fact that experts cultivating in all kinds of energy could gather in one place. It was the perfect place for ambitious women like Emily and Phoebe to expand their business. With McKinley's help as the City Lord and the wisdom of Emily and Phoebe, the Han family's Celestial Pearl Pharmacy had developed rapidly. They had nearly destroyed most of the medicine and energy gem shops in the city and became the only major business in Ethereal City. Inside the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, Phoebe, Emily, Sanguiner, and Bollins had gathered in a hall and were exchanging information about their recent gains. Ethereal City is a good place. However, it is said that the Fringe is where we should go. After all, we won't be staying here for long, so we don't need to invest too much energy here, said Stadholm with a smile. During this period of time, the members of the Han family felt very comfortable. Unlike when they were in the City of Shadows and Witherbone City, McKinley had truly treated them as one of his own in Ethereal City. He protected them wholeheartedly and did not harbor any ill intentions. Even the cunning old foxes of the Han family could sense that. Yes, McKinley has been very kind to us. I will talk to him about giving him 10% of the profits from the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy and Goldstone Enterprise. Perhaps he's grateful to Brian for saving his life, but he's protecting us a little too much. Even when the owners of the shops go to the City Lord's mansion every day to cause a ruckus, claiming that we've broken the trading rules of Ethereal City, he still ignores us, said Phoebe smilingly. In Ethereal City, she felt as though she was a dragon that had returned to the sea and was able to unleash her full potential. We can't go too far. After all, when Brian arrives, we will be heading to the Fringe. If we cause too much trouble in Ethereal City, McKinley will be put in a difficult position, said Phoebe smilingly. Emily had always been a considerate person. If someone treated her well, she would keep it in mind and find an opportunity to return the favor. Why hasn't Master returned yet? I wonder what's going on, said Sanguiner with his brows bunched. He seemed rather worried. The party fell silent after hearing those words. They knew that Shua would very likely have to face that incomparably terrifying existence when he returned to the Death Dominion. To them, the Overgod of the Death Dominion was an unimaginably powerful enemy. The longer they stayed on Elysium, the more they understood how terrifying an Overgod could be. Although they had confidence in Han Shua, they were still deeply worried when they thought that Han Shua might have to face an almost invincible existence. Don't worry, Master will be fine. Even if he can't defeat the Overgod, he should be able to escape, said Dark Dragon Gilbert, as always, blindly trusting Han Shua. He wasn't worried about Han Shua's safety in the slightest. In his opinion, Han Shua would be fine. An Overgod who possesses the quintessence possesses the most fundamental energy of heaven and earth. It is far beyond our knowledge. In this vast material plane, there are only 12 Overgods who possess the quintessence. No matter how hard we try, we will never be able to fathom how terrifying they are. I hope Senior Brother is fine, said Bollins with a soft sigh. All right, don't worry. Pack your things and get ready. We will depart for the Fringe in a moment. Suddenly, a sonorous voice sounded from outside. A majestic figure abruptly appeared in the room. Who else could it be but Han Shua? I'm glad that you are fine, Brian. How did it go? Asked Emily hastily. Hill is dead. Hoffs, Wallace, Larrickson, and Ralph are all dead. Don't worry, they are all dead, said Han Shua smilingly. He then turned to the crowd and said, It seems that McKinley has been treating you well. Yes. Compared to what I experienced in Witherbone City, it's like heaven and earth, replied Stadholm with a big smile. It seemed that he really liked this place. Sanguiner, Emily, Phoebe, and the others were overjoyed when they heard that Hill and the others were dead. To them, those people were the sworn enemies of the Han clan. Only when they were finished would the Han clan be able to make a name for themselves and not have any worries in the future. All right, get ready. I will be making a trip to McKinley's mansion. When I return, we will depart for the Fringe. Haha, no matter how great Ethereal City is, it is still someone else's territory. Only the Fringe is ours. I'm sure you will like the pandemonium, said Han Shua smilingly. Then, without waiting for them to reply, he vanished from the place. Ethereal City. Inside the mansion of the City Lord, McKinley, who was meditating in the gymnasium, put on a bright smile when he saw Han Shua suddenly appearing in front of him. His face was filled with delight as he said, Brian, You have finally returned. McKinley had undergone a drastic transformation. The depression he had accumulated over the years had been swept away. He appeared to be in high spirits. It seemed that he was very satisfied with his life as the city lord of Ethereal City. Haha, you are doing well, old fella. It seems that your strength has improved again. How is it? When will you become an overgod? Han Shuo joked. Han Shuo and McKinley had spent a lot of time together over the past few years. Although the two did not meet often, as the Fringe was very close to Ethereal City, they frequently exchanged letters. Han Shuo knew about McKinley's situation very well, and McKinley also knew about Han Shuo's big moves in the Fringe. No matter how much my strength has improved, I won't be as fast as you. McKinley laughed heartily. He shook his head and said in a somewhat angry manner, You were so weak back on Profound Continent, but as soon as you arrived on Elysium, you showed off your abilities. To think that you would reach such a realm in less than 100 years. I really wonder what kind of monster you are. I will be bringing my people to the Fringe soon. How is the item you promised me coming along? Asked Han Shuo after blinking his eyes. I have long since prepared it for you. McKinley laughed involuntarily. A space ring flew towards Han Shuo. Magical mirror, teleportation scroll, space-time lock, and... McKinley smilingly explained to Han Shuo how to use the space ring. The magical mirror could allow people to communicate with each other across long distances. It was very useful for Han Shuo to gather intelligence in the Fringe. The teleportation scroll was a life-saving treasure that could allow one to tear through space and escape in an instant. Although Han Shuo did not need it, the important members of the Han family would have a much higher chance of survival if they had the scroll. As for the space-time lock, as the name suggested, it could freeze space. Most experts who cultivated in the Edict of Space would have the means to tear through space and escape. With the space-time lock, if the Han family wanted to attack someone, they could prevent that person from leaving the Fringe alive. Apart from those 3 items, there were also a few other items that could only be refined by experts who cultivated in the Edict of Space. To Han Shuo, those items were very useful. Han Shuo had asked McKinley to refine them for him. Not bad at all. Haha, thank you. Han Shuo scanned through the space ring and discovered that there were dozens of magical mirrors, a dozen or so teleportation scrolls, space freezing locks, and a few other miscellaneous gadgets. All in all, there were still quite a few of them, more than enough for the current House of Han's use. Brian, I heard that you caused a huge commotion in the city of Gorging Clouds and even fought with Yaris? McKinley suddenly asked. He seemed to be very interested in Brian's story. Han Shuo nodded and smilingly said, That's right. Yaris' strength has already reached the realm of Overgod, and he's an extraordinary person. If it weren't for his younger brother, Larixon, I would be more than happy to befriend him. Unfortunately, we can only be enemies now. It's my fault for killing Larixon. McKinley couldn't help but laugh. After thinking for a moment, he said to Han Shuo with some difficulty, Brian, I have a favor to ask of you. Han Shuo was taken aback, but he soon smiled and said, We're so close. Just tell me what you need. Even if I have to help you commit murder or arson, I don't mind. Upon hearing those words, McKinley's eyes were filled with gratitude. After a moment of silence, he said, As you know, my divine body and divine soul were separated because of Jar, one of the 3 keepers of the light. Brian, I want to take revenge. I hope that you can help me. Jar was one of the 3 keepers of the God of Light's domain and the most devout believer of the God of Light. He possessed late-stage high god strength many years ago. McKinley obviously wasn't a match for Jar in a one-on-one fight. If he wanted to take revenge, he would have to look for help, and Han Shuo was the most suitable candidate. No problem. Just confirm the time and place, and I will help you. Han Shuo agreed without hesitation. Thank you. McKinley looked at Han Shuo and expressed his gratitude. He knew that he owed Han Shuo a huge favor. I will inform you after I find out Jar's whereabouts. All right, I'll wait for your news. All right, I'll be taking my men back to the Fringe. Han Shuo smiled and didn't take the matter to heart. He didn't even bother to exchange pleasantries with McKinley. With a sway of his body, he disappeared. Chapter 9:18. The Fringe did not change much because of Han Shua's emergence. Fighting, killing, and pillaging were still the main themes of the Fringe. On the outskirts of the Fringe, small-scale and large-scale battles never ceased. As soon as Han Shua and the Han family appeared in the Fringe, they attracted the attention of many forces. But as soon as they noticed Han Shua among the crowd, those forces immediately became quiet and fled as far as they could. In the Fringe, Han Shua had become a well-known figure that no one dared to provoke. Sanguis, Ballins, and Gilbert, the three of them loved to fight. They were like dragons returning to the sea after arriving at the Fringe. From time to time, they would leave the main force and wander around alone. Every time they returned, they would be covered in wounds. All three of them were cultivators of demonic arts. They knew that if they wanted to improve their strength in the shortest time possible, they would have to temper themselves through repeated battles. The Fringe was the perfect place for them to do so. After they left Han Shua, the three of them would sometimes travel together, and sometimes they would separate. They would look for small forces that weren't particularly strong to attack and use their enemies' deaths to sharpen their strength. Han Shua allowed them to do as they pleased because he knew that the three of them possessed decent strength and were cunning. Even in the Fringe, they wouldn't suffer too much. Their injuries weren't particularly serious, and they would recover in a day or two. In the beginning, the three of them went out alone. Later on, they gradually brought along some of the Han clan's guards. The Han clan's guards had been tempered for a long time and were not easy to deal with. Once there were more of them, and with the three of them commanding them, many forces along the way were killed. Later on, when many forces saw them approaching, they would hide far away. The Fringe isn't as scary as I thought. I didn't encounter any powerful enemies along the way. Sanguiner had been in high spirits for the past few days. Having single-handedly killed a mid-stage high god for the first time, his confidence had swelled to an unprecedented level. He even became somewhat arrogant. Haha, we are too strong. But the Fringe sure is a chaotic place. Every time we walk, we will see a great battle. Those guys are more ferocious than the next. This place is really interesting. It suits our Han family very well. Gilbert was also very excited. In this place, he could unleash all of his energy and improve himself by killing. Obviously, he liked the Fringe a lot. Only Ballins wasn't as confident as the other two. He coldly glanced at the two and said, "The Fringe is famous for being a chaotic place on Elysium. All kinds of fiends from the 12 dominions are gathered here. The 5 sovereigns definitely live up to their reputation. The reason why we haven't encountered any real enemies is that we have yet to venture into the heart of the Fringe. Another reason is that the real major forces more or less know about our origins. They are wary of my senior brother's strength and dare not make a move on us. You two, don't be so full of yourself and think that the Fringe is an easy place to deal with. Ever since Sanguiner and Gilbert nearly killed Shati O for his sake in Witherbone City, Ballins had regarded the two as his most trustworthy friends. Otherwise, Ballins wouldn't have spoken so much to them. If it were anyone else, he would at most let out a cold groan. Sanguiner and Gilbert knew that this was Ballins's personality. They never thought that there was anything wrong with his attitude. After hearing those words, Sanguiner put on a mischievous smile and said, "You do have a point, old man. But I believe that apart from the 4 sovereigns, there shouldn't be any other powerful forces in the Fringe. In my opinion, even without Master's name, we can still establish our own foothold in the Fringe." That's right. The leaders of the smaller forces are only early-stage high gods. The 3 of us, together with 50 guards, will be able to make a name for ourselves in the Fringe. Why don't we head to the Omphalos alone? I believe that we can reach there without using Master's power, suggested Gilbert excitedly after hearing Sanguiner's words. Sanguiner's eyes lit up and he replied, "That's right. We can head there first. With Master taking care of us, the matriarchs and those old geezers will be fine. No, if anything goes wrong, I won't be able to answer to senior brother." Ballins frowned, and without thinking, he straightforwardly refused. "Aya, old man, don't be so pedantic. We will be fine. Come on, let's go. We will head to the Omphalos and wait for them. After all, we have already asked them about the general location, laughed Sanguiner and took the lead. He didn't seem to care about the dangers ahead of him. Gilbert snickered and went over to tug at Balins, saying, "It's all right. Master definitely won't blame us. The fringe isn't that bad after all. Hurry up, don't spoil everyone's mood." As he spoke, he dragged Balins along, ignoring Balin's grim expression. If it weren't for Sanguiner and Gilbert standing up for him in Witherbone City, Balins would have decisively refused and would have led them back to the main army. But now that Balins had considered Sanguiner and Gilbert as the most trustworthy people apart from Han Shuo, Balins didn't want to spoil their fun. After hesitating for a moment, under Gilbert's tugging and tugging, he acquiesced to the duo's decision. But in his heart, he felt that it was inappropriate to do so. Sanguiner, Gilbert, and Balins, along with 50 Han family guards, left the main army of the Han family and headed towards the Amphilas. In the beginning, the enemies they encountered were small forces led by early-stage and mid-stage high gods. With Sanguis, Balins, and Gilbert's combined strength, as well as the terrifying strength of the House of Han guards, the three of them were able to rampage their way through. There weren't many forces that could contend against them. Sanguis and Gilbert were in high spirits along the way. They had forgotten the fact that the deeper they went, the more dangerous it would be. They shouted as they charged towards the center of the fringe, hoping to enter the Amphilas as soon as possible. However, when they were far from the main army of the Han family, some of the major forces in the Amphilas were unaware of their identities as well as Han Shuo's. On top of that, they had deliberately cut off their relationship with the Han family and did not intend to make use of Han Shuo's strength. Gradually, some of the more ferocious great leaders began to notice them. Finally, a late-stage high god led by a late-stage high god stopped them halfway up a mountain peak. Moreover, there was more than one late-stage high god. One was a late-stage high god of death, one was a late-stage high god of wind, and several mid-stage and early-stage high gods. There were also a group of mid-stage and late-stage mid-gods. The overall strength of this force far exceeded that of Sanguiner, Balins, and Gilbert. Hee, you have been killing to your heart's content, haven't you? Hee, you even dared to touch Lord Loge's subordinates. You really don't know how to spell the word death. The late-stage high god of death sneered. Looking at Sanguiner, Gilbert, and the others who were heavily surrounded, he shouted, "You have two choices before you. Either you surrender and become Lord Loge's followers, or you die." It was at this moment that Sanguiner and Gilbert realized that the fringe was not like the darkness and death dominions. Experts were as common as the clouds in the sky. Moreover, every one of them was unreasonable and heartless. As soon as one fell into a disadvantageous position, they would pounce on one and tear one to shreds. Sanguiner was confident that he could kill an expert with mid-stage high god strength. However, he also knew that against a late-stage high god, he wouldn't stand a chance. The enemy, on the other hand, had not only two late-stage high gods, but also 6 or 7 experts of the other two realms. Such a force was not something that they could handle. Sanguiner and Gilbert exchanged glances with each other. They finally regretted looking down on the heroes of the world. "Friend, we are from the Han family of Pandemonium." Balins took a step forward and looked at Sanguis in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. He was much calmer than Sanguis and Gilbert. At this critical moment, Balin's mental fortitude, which he had tempered through countless dangers and setbacks, came into play. What? The Han family of Pandemonium? The bald man who was wearing a mocking smile a moment ago suddenly turned pale. He asked, "Who are you to Lord Brian?" "This is his disciple," replied Balins as he pointed at Sanguiner. Balins heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the man's attitude. He thought to himself, Senior Brother is indeed fearsome in the Pandemonium. It seems that with Senior Brother's reputation, there won't be any problems today. The bald man wore a grave face. He scrutinized Balins, Han Shuo, and Han Shuo for a moment before he suddenly shouted, "Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. Otherwise, if Brian finds out, we will bring a lot of unnecessary trouble to his lordship. I will skin anyone who dares to escape." "How dare you?" Balins was shocked and shouted fiercely, "Haha, Why wouldn't I dare? Do you think that I won't touch you just because of Brian's reputation? Haha, none of you will escape today. He won't even know who did it. How can he find me? You outsiders don't know the situation in the Fringe at all. Let me tell you, the people of the Fringe are all madmen. There's nothing they don't dare to do. Laughed the bald man maniacally. His maniacal demeanor made him sound like a madman. Attack, commanded the bald man with a wave of his hand. Balin's heart sank. He knew that they were in deep trouble. Chapter 9:19. When the bald man saw that their strengths were relatively weak, he intended to kill all of them. If none of them were to walk out alive, nobody would know what happened here and nobody would be able to avenge him. After the bald man shouted coldly, everyone swarmed forward and surrounded Balins, Sanguiner, and Gilbert in the center. They blocked all possible escape routes and made it clear that they had no intention of sparing their lives. Kill! Shouted the bald man again. He and the other High God of Wind did not join the fight. From his point of view, given the strength of Balins, Sanguiner, and Gilbert, there was no need for the two of them to join the fight. 5 or 6 High Gods and 100 or so minions suddenly charged at Han Shuo and Gilbert. Those High Gods possessed early stage or mid-stage strength and therefore posed little threat to Han Shuo's party. Sanguis and Gilbert's faces turned grim. They took the lead and intercepted 2 of the High Gods. Balins followed closely behind. When the sharp flying sword in his hand flew out, the entire sky was filled with surging killing intent. An early-stage High God who had just approached Balins was intimidated by the terrifying killing intent. His body only slowed down for a moment before the sword ray swept past him. Unable to dodge in time, a deep gash was left on his chest. Sanguiner, Gilbert, let's find an opportunity to escape, shouted Balins after forcing his opponents to retreat. The eyes of Sanguiner and Gilbert glinted coldly. They charged at their opponents even more ferociously. Every move they made was an attack that put their lives on the line. Their 2 opponents didn't dare to perish together with them and had no choice but to evade and delay. However, Sanguiner, Balins, and Gilbert were only 3 while their opponents had 6 High Gods. When the 6 High Gods surrounded them, Sanguiner, Balins, and Gilbert immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. If they didn't put their lives on the line, they wouldn't have lasted more than a few minutes. The 6 High Gods surrounded Sanguiner, Han Shuo, and Han Shuo. The 100 or so mid-gods approached the Han family guards and suddenly attacked the Han family guards in unison. Unlike Sanguiner, Han Shuo, and Han Shuo, although the Han family guards were outnumbered by half, they displayed terrifying combat strength. They spread out like a machete. Not only did they evade many attacks in an instant, but they also attacked in groups of 3 to 5, inflicting heavy casualties on their opponents. In the first clash, 5 of the Han family guards were injured and 1 was killed. On the other hand, 10 of the Han family guards were killed and 30 were injured. Although the Han family guards were all mid-gods and weaker than their opponents, they were able to gain the upper hand in a single attack. Such an achievement caused the bald man who had been observing coldly from the sidelines to jolt. He suddenly shouted, "2 of you, get rid of those guards." The 6 High Gods that were besieging Sanguiner, Balins, and Gilbert immediately realized that their subordinates had failed when they heard the bald man's shout. 2 of them hastily rushed towards the Han family guards. One of them was an early-stage High God while the other was a mid-stage High God. As soon as the 2 joined the battle, they immediately reversed the situation. The Han family guards, who had the upper hand, were now on the passive side. The number of casualties gradually increased. The pressure on Sanguiner, Han Shuo, and Han Shuo was greatly relieved. Originally, if the 6 of them had joined hands, Sanguiner, Balins, and Han Shuo wouldn't have been able to escape if they hadn't used their escape arts. However, because there were 2 of them, they only suffered some injuries and escaped the fate of being killed. However, it was apparent that the bald man who was observing the battle didn't want to prolong it. When he saw that his subordinates weren't able to finish off the Han family guards immediately, he couldn't help but sneer. Just as the outside world has said, the Han family cannot be underestimated. Humph, Even so, you won't be able to escape." As he spoke, another high god of wind slowly approached Balins, Sanguiner, and Gilbert. They planned to finish off the battle as quickly as possible. When Balin saw that the other two high gods couldn't help but intervene, he hastily shouted, "Sanguiner, let's go. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to." "But what about them?" Sanguiner turned to look at the Han family guards behind him. His scarlet eyes were filled with reluctance. PFFF. In a moment of carelessness, Sanguiner's chest was pierced by a bone spear. Fresh blood immediately flowed from the wound. "Only when we leave can they be avenged." When Balin saw that Sanguiner was hesitating, he grew anxious. He saw that the bald man was already closing in on them. If he delayed any longer, he might not even have the chance to use the escape art. "Hee, trying to run? You won't get away." The bald man laughed heartily. As he spoke, he had already closed in on them and was about to attack. When Sanguiner, Balins, and Gilbert were about to be killed, a maniacal laughter suddenly sounded. A majestic figure suddenly appeared between Sanguiner, Balins, and Gilbert. The figure raised his hand, and the energy of destruction formed a gray mist in front of the bald man, blocking his attack. "Polo, it's you?" cried the bald man in surprise. His face immediately turned ugly. He coldly groaned and said, "You better stay out of my business, or you won't be able to get away with it. Luca, you sure are awesome. Since I'm here today, I'm not afraid of you." Polo arrogantly waved his hand and shouted, "Brothers, attack!" Following Polo's shout, shadowy figures emitting chilling intent emerged from every corner of the battlefield. Without saying a word, they immediately joined the battle and surrounded the bald man's party. The bald man named Luca suddenly discovered that Polo had brought more than 300 high god experts with him. Among them, there were twice as many high gods as his party. The bald man's face jolted. He stopped attacking Balins, Han Shuo, and glared at Polo furiously. "Polo, you should know who I am. How dare you offend Lord Logue? Don't you know that after today, you won't be able to escape death? Don't King threaten me with Logue. I'm not afraid." Polo put on a domineering face and laughed maniacally. "Luca, oh Luca, the situation in the fringe is no longer the same as before. Tyre, Logue, Wasis, and Asura are no longer the only ones in charge. You are so well informed. Don't you know who I'm with?" Upon hearing those words, the bald man's heart jolted. He suddenly recalled the news he had recently received. It was said that all god hunters in the fringe were under the control of one person. As Logue's confidant, the bald man naturally knew how close that person was to Han Shuo. "You work for Han Hao?" The bald man's face turned grave. He was no longer as arrogant as before. "Haha, it's good that you know. Get the F***CK out of my way. Those fellas seem to be related to the Han family. If you deliver them to me, I will let this matter slide. I will consult the leader first." Polo put on a strange smile and looked at Luca. His party was stronger than Luca's, and it was only natural for them to be arrogant. So what if he says he is from the Han family? Luca sneered and said, "Recently, too many people have entered the Omphalos under the banner of the Han family. Damn it, everyone claims to be related to the Han family. At this rate, how are we going to continue doing business? I don't care about that. Hurry up and let them go. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude," said Polo in an extremely rude and unreasonable manner. Luca put on a furious face. However, he was not in a good position and could not back down now. He knew that the three people behind him were indeed related to the Han family. If he let them go, he would be in big trouble. Therefore, he did not know what to do. "Hey, you over there. You say that you work for Han Hao?" Gilbert suddenly shouted and tried to curry favor with Polo. Polo shot a sideways glance at Gilbert and replied impatiently, "That's right. What does that have to do with you?" Gilbert stared blankly for a moment. He did not expect that Polo would still be so domineering. He immediately shouted, "Damn it, I've known Han Hao since we were on Profound Continent. How dare you yell at me when you are working for that fella?" Upon hearing those words, Polo was startled. He squinted his eyes and sized up Gilbert, Balins, and the others. He suddenly sensed that Balins and Sanguiner had an aura similar to that of Little Skull Han Hao. Polo's heart skipped a beat. He hesitantly asked, "Are you really from the Han family?" F***CK, Polo. "So you are here to stir up trouble without knowing anything?" Upon hearing Polo's words, Luca immediately realized that Polo was here to stir up trouble. Otherwise, he wouldn't have questioned Gilbert in such a manner. Polo smirked mischievously and somewhat awkwardly replied, "Just as you said, all the outsiders who come to the Omphalos claim to be from the Han family. I can't even tell who is the real one." As he spoke, Polo took out a magical mirror and asked Gilbert, "What's your name? Tell me now. I need to report this to the chief." "Just tell him that I'm Dark Dragon Gilbert. That fellow will surely remember me." Gilbert laughed heartily. Polo nodded, took a step back, and activated a magical mirror among his subordinates. They were probably going to report to their superiors. The image of Little Skull Han Hao gradually appeared in the magical mirror. After listening to Polo's report, he straightforwardly gave the order. Polo nodded. The smile on his face disappeared, and he walked towards Han Hao in a sinister manner. "What? Did I do something wrong?" Gilbert was alarmed when he saw that Polo looked like he was about to kill someone. "Kill them all. Spare no one," Polo suddenly commanded in a cold voice. "Kill who?" Some of Polo's subordinates asked hastily. "Of course it's Luca's men. Damn it, it's real this time. Like I said, they are pleasing to the eye," said Polo. Chapter 920. After hearing Polo's words, the God Hunter subordinates no longer had any doubts. They sneered and charged at Luca and his men. In an instant, they surrounded Luca and his men, blocking every single gap. Luca's heart turned cold. He shouted, "Polo, do you really dare to attack me? I work for Lord Logue. If you touch me, Lord Logue will not let you get away with it." Luca realized that the forces on his side were far inferior to his opponents. He had no choice but to use Logue's name to intimidate Polo. "None of you will be able to escape. Who the hell will know who killed you?" Polo put on a sinister smile and said, "Besides, so what if Logue knows? Hee hee, do you think our lord is afraid of him? Kill them all. Leave none alive." Luca had previously surrounded Sanguiner, Balins, and Han Shuo with these words to mock them. Little did he expect that in just a few minutes, he would fall into his own trap. Not only did he suffer the same fate, but he was also mocked by Polo with the same words. Luca was so furious that he felt like vomiting blood. He felt that he was at his wits' end against the unreasonable and cruel Polo. Polo did not give Luca any chance to speak. He charged at Luca with a ferocious face and surrounded Luca. Together with another late-stage High God of Thunder, he and another late-stage High God of Thunder attacked Luca. Suddenly, Balins, Sanguiner, and Gilbert became bystanders. Not a single one of Luca's subordinates had a chance to attack them. They were all stopped by Polo's men. Sanguiner put on a stunned face. He looked at Dark Dragon Gilbert in puzzlement and asked, "Why do you think that Han Hao has such a group of powerful subordinates? From what you have said, back on Profound Continent, he didn't seem to be particularly powerful. How did he manage to gather so many powerful subordinates in just a few decades?" "How am I supposed to know?" Gilbert rolled his eyes and said smilingly, "But that guy is really strange. He has been following Master around for a long time, killing and arson. He has been with Master for a much longer time than we have. Hee hee, weren't you also powerless when you were in the Abyss? Isn't he still able to strut around on Elysium? That guy has been with Master for so long, and he has a better foundation than you to begin with. It's only natural for him to improve so quickly." That's right. Back when we were developing the Han family in the City of Shadows, he had been accumulating his power in the Ronson Canyon. Before he left the Ronson Canyon, he was the true leader of the Ronson Canyon. After such a long time, it's only natural that he's become even more powerful. Balins explained. He knew a little about Han Hao and knew a little about him. "I really want to meet him," Sanguiner said in a low voice. All along, Sanguiner had been the most powerful member of the Han family after Han Shuo. Over the years, he had made rapid progress and gradually gained some arrogance. But now, with the addition of Han Hao, whether it was in terms of strength or prestige, he seemed to be vaguely suppressing him. As they were both youngsters, it was only natural for him to feel a little indignant. It was only natural that he would want to spar with Sanguiner. Ballins and Gilbert looked at Sanguiner in amusement and did not say anything. However, they both understood that although Sanguiner had made rapid progress in the Han family, he would have no chance of winning against Little Skull Han Hao. He would be asking for trouble. Just think about it. If even Han Hao's subordinate, Polo, possessed late-stage high god strength, Han Hao himself wouldn't be any weaker than Polo. From this, it could be seen that Sanguiner had no chance of winning against Han Hao at this moment. He would only be asking to be humiliated. While Ballins, Gilbert, and Sanguiner were discussing in low voices, Luca's subordinates were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. They were utterly routed by Polo's god hunters. In just a few moments, they had suffered disastrous losses. Sanguiner, Gilbert, have you noticed that these god hunters seem to be very familiar with each other's teamwork? Ballins suddenly asked. Sanguiner and Gilbert stared blankly for a moment. They bunched their brows and carefully observed for a moment before they nodded. Polo's god hunters were obviously different from Luca's subordinates. They actually knew how to cooperate with each other. It was obvious that they had gone through training in demonic formations. Although they weren't as well coordinated as the Han family guards who had been painstakingly trained in the 8 Desolation and Torment formation for many years, they were at least 10 times better than Luca's subordinates. It seems that this youngster has learned quite a lot from Master. Haha, it's no wonder he can make such a name for himself among the god hunters, said Gilbert smilingly after taking a few glances. He is indeed extraordinary. It seems that Sanguiner has found himself a worthy opponent, said Ballins indifferently after taking a glance at Sanguiner. He knew that Sanguiner had made rapid progress over the years, and that his temperament had undergone subtle changes. Nowadays, other than his master, Han Shuo, Sanguiner had very little respect for anyone else. Ballins knew that this wasn't a good thing. However, it wouldn't be a bad thing if Sanguiner could set a good example for him. Especially since the other party was also a member of the Han family. Friendly competition would be the best training for Sanguiner. Let's help out too. Haha, we can't just stand and watch. Gilbert was idle for a while and felt his hands itching again. He immediately suggested excitedly. Before Ballins could voice his opinion, Sanguiner charged forward with blood-red eyes. An intense stench of blood suddenly spread from his body. Under the immense pressure from Little Skull Han Hao, Sanguiner's fighting spirit seemed to have been stimulated, and he seemed to have made some sort of breakthrough in his blood god mantra cultivation. Holy shit, Sanguiner has gone insane. That bloody stench just now was extremely pungent. Don't tell me he has made another breakthrough? Exclaimed Gilbert in surprise. He was the most familiar with Sanguiner, and the two of them were standing very close to each other. He immediately sensed the even more intense stench of blood coming from Sanguiner's body. Ballins nodded his head in satisfaction. A rare smile appeared on his face as he said, Sanguiner is indeed powerful. Based on his rate of improvement, I think he will surpass Han Hao sooner or later. That will be difficult. Haha, you haven't seen Han Hao. That guy is even more terrifying. He is even colder and more inhumane than you. Although Sanguiner has made rapid progress, I think he is far from Han Hao in terms of mental cultivation. Han Hao is the real cold-blooded one. Gilbert thought for a while. He felt that compared to Little Skull, Sanguiner seemed to be lacking something. I really want to meet him. Ballins nodded his head. It seemed that he was also very curious about Little Skull Han Hao. Let's do it. Kill all these guys. Gilbert did not waste any more words. He called out to Ballins and charged towards Luca's men. Polo's side was already at an absolute advantage. With the addition of Sanguiner, Ballins, and Gilbert, the death rate of Luca's followers increased exponentially. Miserable shrieks and wails could be heard as they were devoured by the divine energy of the god hunters. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 of Luca's followers were strewn with corpses. Only a few high gods were barely holding on, but it seemed that they wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Luca, you can't escape. Damn it, it's too bad that you don't cultivate in the energy of destruction. Otherwise, I would be rich today. Polo and 5 other high gods surrounded Luca. They bared their teeth and laughed maniacally. Their attitudes were incomparably arrogant. Polo, although you can't absorb it, don't you still have us? A high god of death greedily licked the corner of his scarlet lips. His ferocious eyes landed on Luca as though he was about to tear Luca apart and devour him alive. Luca, who was heavily surrounded, wore a face of despair. As he listened to the god hunters talking about how they could devour his divine energy without any scruples, Luca felt incomparably miserable. Every time he tried to use the items in his space ring to escape, he would discover that the attacks from the god hunters were several times fiercer than before. He had no time to use his final trump card. Luca's injuries became more and more severe. Gradually, he discovered that his eyelids had become extremely heavy. Even his divine soul's ability to think seemed to have been weakened.